welcome to the Big 12 Mafia, College Football Mafia Show. I'm one of your hosts, Nathan Bomber Brown. With me are my three partners in crime and host as well. That would be Mowing After Dark, The Wild Ute, and Immaculate View. How you guys doing on Friday?
Good.
Excellent.
Doing good.
All right. We're going to be having TJ Pittinger is going to be joining us. What's his hashtag? All claw. Let's see.
Double fries, no slaw.
Thank you. I was
Nice
getting the slaw in the wrong place. Thank you. Double fries, no slaw. And TJ Pittinger is going to be with us. We're going to talk Florida State. We're going to talk ACC. We're going to talk maybe a little Paul Feinbaum and some big 10 versus SEC talk. I mean, the list just goes on and on. But we're going to start with private equity. And after we get started, we're going to wait a minute for TJ to join, and we'll go from there. So before we do that, I'm going to ask everybody to subscribe to the show. Please turn on your notifications and follow us all on Twitter. That way you know when our shows are going to be going on. As well, we want you to, consider becoming a member of the Big 12 Mafia Show. We have special shows going all the time. This week, we just cut one for Is Clemson Ready for the Big Ten? And I'm going to let Moen and Ute, who did that video, tell us a little bit about it.
It's fresh off the press here. So Moen and I did a deep dive into Clemson's fit into the Big Ten. We added more variables than the Florida State video that we put out a few weeks ago. And honestly, guys, this one's pretty spot on, I think, like as far as the modeling and what we're looking like and brand value and the real fit for Clemson. I actually love the model. We're going to apply that same model to UNC, Virginia, Georgia Tech to see how everyone stack ranks. And at the end of this thing, we're going to use the same model to stack rank the ACC candidates. But hey, that's weeks down the line now. I'm super stoked about it, though. Mona and I did a video yesterday. Clemson to the Big Ten. And again, check it out if you haven't. Everything is going to give you a lot of details.
And this is where I'm showing you. These are the videos, both the Clemson to the Big Ten and Florida State to the Big Ten. Florida State to the Big Ten was our first video. It was for our subscribers for, I believe, a full week, right? Yes. Is that how long that ran last time? And it was so successful that for our members that we decided to do a series of them. The next one is the one that you was just talking about, and that's Clemson to the Big Ten. If you want to watch that show, you see down here this little members only tag. That means the only people that can watch that until the timer runs out is going to be members to the Big 12 Mafia Show. Let me quickly show everybody how you become a member. You go to the Big 12 Mafia page, you hit the join link, and then it brings up the different membership levels that you can join. Each one has their own loyalty badges and other emojis that go with it, and they all have different price points. So we want to encourage everybody to sign up for that and make sure that you're in the know with some of these other stories. Let's see here. Anything else, Mo, you want to add to that before we start talking private equity?
Yeah, that video we're going to leave up there for members only for the next 2 weeks. So after 2 weeks, we'll release that to the general public. But if you want to see it, it's a good one. It's over 30 minutes. It really, and the final slide is probably one of the most telling slides you will ever see on where Clemson lands. So I would definitely give it a watch if you're a member. If you're not a member, become a member. If you're feeling generous, by all means, gift memberships to the chat. You can do that by going down to the bottom right of the chat window and selecting the cash icon and doing the gifted member option. And we'll start giving away some promo memberships in the coming months too.
And no one does it like us. Like everyone else will throw a little detail out here, some data out here, and then leave you to interpret everything. With these videos, we're getting in depth on really a lot of the considerations here. This is no joke. Like, I take this real seriously. I'm super interested in this. I want to provide it to you, making good content with most recent information. So this is good stuff. And hope you enjoy it and everything. We'll put more of them out there, but it gives you a really, really, really detailed and comprehensive look at realignment. Seriously, like these 7 variables are extremely important to the Big Ten. Maybe not the SEC, maybe not the Big 12, but we're going to have custom variables for those conferences down the line. But this is basically the Big Ten model right here, and I think it's nails. And so it's been fun to do these things.
And you know what's the best is that everybody's participating. You're getting a little flavor from each one of us as we add different details and questions to these shows. So Immaculate will have one with Mute in the future, and we'll just start putting them out, weekly, bi-weekly. And we really want to pass this information on without telling you what to think, just presenting the data and then allowing you guys to be in a conversation about it. We also take comments and we take those suggestions and we try to use them in future videos. And we certainly answer as many questions as we can. All right, guys, I'm going to actually name our first segment from now on. It's going to be called The Rundown. And I basically want to go through each of you guys. We're on a Friday. Friday's our big show. We want to pass on as much information as we can to the world right now. So what's your first top of mind for this week?
I'm so excited for this private equity talk. That is right up my alley. That's where my expertise is in the financial realm. So I'm excited to go into this next segment. So can't wait to jump into it and give some thoughts on it.
Immaculate, what do you think?
When it comes to private equity things, I'm probably just going to sit here and listen to Wild you go on about it because that's actually not my strength. So I'm going to glean from him just like I think everyone from chat is. I don't know. We're going to see how big of a deal it is. I mean, it's not really been something that's been big on my radar, but with FAML coming out and starting to talk about it, makes you kind of wonder.
Moen.
Yeah, I'm especially interested in the UNC Board of Governors drama and the power struggle that's going on there right now, and how that can basically shape realignment moving forward.
Absolutely. And it'll dictate kind of behavior for these other schools too. A lot like we talked about, Notre Dame is a key for the Big Ten and realignment. Mm-hmm. I would say North Carolina and North Carolina State right now is the pivot because Florida State we know is gone. So I think that's the easiest way to go through that. All right, well, let's begin with some very brief topics that we can talk about before TJ gets here. The first one I want to show, and I'm going to make sure we get the right screen up as I was playing with it, is this note from Brett McMurphy. You want to tell everybody what this is, Immaculate?
Well, as you can see, Michigan has gone straight ahead right away and raised up their offensive coordinator to head coach. There was some talk in chat about there might need to be 7 days, in terms of a process for a state institution. But maybe they've already did that. Maybe they did that before Harbaugh even left. But they have their new head coach. They're ready to go. So it's probably going to keep some of the players who might have left from leaving.
Anybody else want to comment on this?
It was a safe hire and a really, really solid hire, too, for Michigan. I mean, the training grounds was the Ohio State, Penn State games that Sharon Moore won when Harbaugh was out. These players love him. Like, he's so loyal to Michigan. So I think that it was a no-brainer hire. I think a lot of the players will consider staying. They'll be able to keep this thing intact. But that's a short-term look. I think over the long term, replacing Jim Harbaugh is difficult. How can you replace Jim Harbaugh, right? The guy wins everywhere. Right. So I would imagine that Michigan probably won't stay at its current level and take a slight decline backwards, like probably at a Penn State type of quality level where they're, not top 5 program, but top 10, 12, 15 program. But still, I think this was the right play for Michigan at the moment.
It's a tough year to do this when you have all the new schools coming in and with the new playoff system. So we'll see how they hold it together. But he does have some experience now. 4 games?
Right. Moen, do you have anything else you want to say on
that? It was so late in the coaching carousel. This is just, they'll give him a 3-year deal. If it doesn't work out in 2 years, they'll 86 him and go after a bigger name. But I don't foresee good things happening for Michigan in the future. He's kind of being made the sacrificial lamb. He's had all these kids exit from their senior year. You've probably got violations, NCAA violations coming down the pike at you. Could mean bowl bans, vacated wins, which is sad that the kids are the ones that are going to be punished. But
right. Well, Jim was able to get away scot-free for the most part.
Yeah.
So there's a little hit to his reputation, but nobody cares because he won the championship. It's just the way it goes. My rundown topic tonight is going to be, unfortunately, Liverpool news. It was announced today that Jurgen Klopp, the coach that has won everything possible to win in his almost 10 years in Liverpool, is leaving the group, leaving the team. And that is a heavy day because he has been awesome for Liverpool. And you can see, you'll never walk alone. I've got that on my hat. I've got my jersey, and I got my Liverpool hat. So if you're looking for a reason why I'm dressed all in red, has nothing to do with Utah. I don't want to hear anything about that. It's all about
Yeah,
Liverpool
right,
news.
Bomber.
All right, here we go.
Hey,
Joe,
is
wait a second. Conundrum says go Man U. Okay.
yeah?
Can we
Did he
ban
retire?
him
First
for
off,
5 seconds?
did he retire? Or is he moving on to another team?
When you've watched his video, and I'm happy to share it if people want to see it, he looks completely exhausted.
Okay,
It's been a busy run in Liverpool. Liverpool's top 10 brand in the entire sports industry of the world. Everybody knows Liverpool. We're
They're
talking
often
the
in
entire
Champions
world.
League too, so they get a lot of extra play.
So that's the problem. He just looks really tired. I think eventually he might be the coach for the national team in Germany, though. I think maybe in 2 years that's where he's going to be.
Gotcha. Well, you gonna go after Conundrum?
No, I brought it up just saying. I was just teasing Conundrum.
Yeah.
Go Man U. You guys are welcome to shout out all the teams you want, but for me in my house, we follow Liverpool Football Club. All right. Again, TJ's not quite here, so let's go to the news that we were talking about. That this was on a post. Let me bring it up. Or did you actually get that? Big? Is it bigger, Moen?
I can make it bigger.
No, let's just leave that right there. Oh, there you go. That's perfect.
Ooh.
And you move it over. That's okay. Leave it there. Okay, so let me give you the source code for this. So this is North Carolina news. And what this is a post that came off of one of the message boards that is big for North Carolina and North Carolina State news. I will post the link so everybody doesn't think I'm stealing the source. Let me share that with everybody. You guys are welcome to go watch or read the article yourself, but that's the reference. And this is an excerpt from a post that was a North Carolina message board. All right, should I just bring that source up right there? All right, here we go. We're going to read through just a few of these topics, and I need to make sure I've got mine up too. That this will give you guys some stuff to think about as we're talking about North Carolina and possibly getting severed from North Carolina State. And yeah, go ahead.
Can I say one thing before you go through this? I just want to preface this with one thing that I noticed when I saw this.
Right, go ahead.
A friend of the show, I think you know who I'm already referring to, has pretty much said a lot of this ahead of time. So I found that to be quite interesting that he was right in terms of, this is going to go into it's almost like a little civil war going on within the system. So go right ahead. But just remember, I remember Greg was telling us a lot about this ahead of time.
Yeah, PATC has been all over this too.
When he was saying, I was like, oh, maybe. But with this, it kind of sounds like it's verifying what he was saying.
And I would encourage everybody to chase down the sources, right? We're taking this and we're excerpting it for the show. Could do a little synopsis, but at the end of the day, you guys chase down these sources. You don't have to take our word for it. All this stuff is out there, and Greg has been covering it from the beginning. That I sort of think's out, and everybody knows, but I appreciate you guys calling attention to it because certainly we wouldn't be here without him. All right, I'm just going to read a few of these. There's 2 pages of pictures, and I want to get through each of them if we can. The first 1, 2, and 4, I'm going to read verbatim, and then we're going to talk about them for a second. First one is there's a big struggle going on at Carolina. Many different factors or factions who have all preferences and agendas. I'm going to read it here. The Board of Trustees want the SEC and current SEC leans along with Peter Hans, but not at NCSU, that's North Carolina State, expense, or not at North Carolina State's expense, or leaving them financially behind. But from that, everybody knows what we're talking about, calimony, right? That would be Cal and UCLA, same type of thing. They don't want to cut off and hurt one school at the addition of another. Let's see here. However, Cunningham and the former chancellor's KG are and were big leans. When we say leans, I mean they lean towards those places instead of the Big Ten, thus helping to explain the sudden departure. A rift within the university's leadership. Lee Roberts, SEC lean, again, same thing. However, the ACC is most likely the preferred first choice, especially if it protects the Big Four of UNC, Duke, Wake, and North Carolina State, as well as the core ACC, pending an ACC implosion. If UNC leaves, this is the big couple sentences here. If UNC leaves, the league likely dissolves, and the UNC Board of Governors and ACC knows this. They want the NC Big Four, North Carolina Big Four, we just talked about those, to remain and will control and ensure the public universities, UNC and NC State, especially NC State, doesn't get the short end or are at best protected. So what do you guys take from that first? That one paragraph by itself basically lays everything out, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, it lays everything out here. Yeah, this is a war. If I'm a USC person right now, I'm not too happy because they've slapped the handcuffs on you, and NC State is basically like a JanSport backpack right now, weighing you down from making a realignment move, which is, I think it's kind of crazy, honestly, that you see this kind of stuff. As somebody that works in the finance industry, that wants to see schools and people do as well as they can, like having something like this where an NC State's basically acting as a backpack to UNC seems criminal to me. When you have a situation here where UNC could be making $75 million a year in the SEC, and they're getting held back and making $30 to maybe $35 million in the ACC because of a backpack, that seems really unfair, guys. And one thing that I question with this whole situation here with UNC and NC State is what's the net impact of everything that we're talking about here? So if you've got UNC and NC State both making $30 to $35 million a year in the ACC, that's netting about $60 to $70 million through both schools through that system in the ACC. But if you put NC State in the Big 12 and UNC in the SEC, you're actually generating more money for both schools. So I don't really see what the point of having this backpack is. It's actually hurting UNC and NC State both, I think, where this is completely insanity, where I just don't see how this is a positive for anybody involved. And this isn't going to work. It's just not going to work at the end of the day, because these type of numbers are going to get laid out in the local government and everything. And there's going to be more lawsuits, and UNC is going to be able to break away eventually. This is just a waste of time is how I see it. We need to talk about it, but it's absolutely ridiculous, I think.
Just really quick, I didn't mean to cut you off, Hugh. I was just welcoming everybody here. We're over 100 people watching. There's another 20 or so on Twitter. Please consider subscribing to the show. Give us a thumbs up. That's really important. You all know that. Leave us a comment or question, and make sure you're following us on Twitter. Lastly, turn on your notifications so you know when our next show is. Moen or Immaculate, you guys want to add anything more to that?
It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to me how what a twisted web they have weaved at UNC, NC State. The further you get in, and I'll let other people go ahead and read that full post. You've linked it in the chat. The further on they get in there, you understand that this is a power move on their part to make sure that North Carolina State is protected at all costs, even at the cost of North Carolina. And there's also the possibility that this could be used to somehow salvage the ACC if they could keep both North Carolina schools in and both Virginia schools in, that they think they can somehow salvage the ACC and prevent an implosion and maybe just lose a Florida State, a Clemson, maybe some bigger brands, but they're able to save the core of the ACC. And it really shows you it is the All Carolina Conference.
I want to do a mic check. People are saying they can't hear me. Is that any better? I'm moving my mic around. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Moen.
I
Let me
can hear
know
you.
if that's any
I can
better.
hear
I sound good to me, but
Yeah, we've
they're
been
the
hearing
ones
you
complaining.
fine, and most
Okay.
folks are hearing you. I'm not quite sure if maybe it's a
Local
YouTube
issue,
issue,
maybe.
yeah, or local, because
Okay.
a few people are saying it's a little low,
Okay.
but I can hear you.
J Baller says he can see me, so we'll just go with
Yeah.
that. Immaculate. What do you think about the synopsis from you?
Yeah, from what he was saying, I think maybe we shouldn't look at this too definitely. Try to explain that is, I think this is part of a long-term negotiation, and in that negotiation, we see some of it surface. Um, I do believe that the SEC, if they absolutely had their way, they would get North Carolina and Virginia, and that's it. And they would just go to 18. They'd be done. We're good. We don't want any more. Or they know, the deal is that they're supposed to take all four, so they're playing hard. I'm not sure, but this just kind of feels like the next step in that negotiation. Like the board is saying, nope, hold up. You're not just getting one of them. You're going to have to take both. Now, we don't know if they're actually going to do that when the time comes, if they would actually hold up the whole process. They're just saying that they could if they want to, and stating what they prefer. There hasn't actually been like any rule laid down that says only, they can only leave if they're together. It's just that they want the right to be able to say no. So I think that this is some gamesmanship in large part, but it's interesting to hear both from Greg and also that post that you had up,
Right.
where it seems like that there's a bit of internal struggle going on with the whole system. So I think that's the big point right now. I think that's what stands out to me as the realist part. In terms of maintaining maybe the ACC, I think that's the backup. Like, I don't think they want to just see Florida State and North Carolina and Virginia leave, because that's like the worst of both worlds. I mean, you lose most of your value at the top, and then you're left over with a whole bunch of stuff, which, from what I was saying, I think that they might want to do as a backup plan. It also hurts that too. So it's really kind of the worst if just like Florida State and Clemson and North Carolina and maybe Virginia all leave. It puts them in a very bad spot. So I think that that's also what they're trying to stop.
Let's move on. There's more topics I want to make sure we cover that's in this post. The second part of it, sorry, I got to take that off. A couple other comments. First one, number 4, says again, this move is a strong power grab move by the UNC Board of Governors, which gives them enormous control and force over the entire UNC university system. You just explained that. Unheard of in terms of control power, but more importantly, it protects NC State in terms of relevancy and negative financial interest to them and the ACC from the conference realignment by Carolina. Number 5, it says, thus, the move basically protects NC State, their interest financially and athletically, by looking after little brother Hans, the NC State booster. And everyone knows the SEC doesn't want NC State University and likely will not take both schools. The SEC absolutely wants Carolina. UNC is number 1 on their list. If you've been following our show, we've been saying that for weeks now. However, they're fearful this will leave NC State further behind in relevance and financially hurt them if they have no conference home or financially puts them in a disadvantage. The Big nor SEC wants NC State, and it's doubtful the UNC went to the SEC. The Big would take NC State. I don't think there's any argument about that. What do you guys? I mean, that just really wraps it up, right? What we're talking about here is backpack. You just said that, and them being attached at the end of the day, they need to make a tactical decision, don't they? Either promote UNC, put it at the best advantage that you can, and maybe in some way financially kick back to NC State, so that they, when they make a move to the Big 12, aren't left holding the bag at the end of the day. Isn't that really what this boils down to?
I just have a hard time seeing why the border regions would want to hinder or even harm UNC to protect NC State. I see it exactly the opposite of how a lot of folks see it. Like UNC has an opportunity to make over double what they're making now in revenues and compete at a national stage, and their current conference doesn't afford them that. They're going to be looking for an exit to get out of that. That's their right. They can do that. Why is the Board of Regents in the state of North Carolina trying to stop that? Like, I just don't see like a positive impact at the end of the day to protect NC State. And plus, guys, NC State might have a landing spot in the Big 12, and they can make more money in the Big 12 anyway. So I think it's just completely psycho house to even try to keep the ACC together and do these type of political maneuvers. Same thing in Virginia. What the heck's going on in Virginia? It's the same JanSport backpack kind of crap you're seeing here. And it's just not going to work. This is not how life is. You can't control another party that has a better opportunity here and everything. So Virginia Tech and NC State consider the Big 12 because the ACC is crumbling. And UNC should be able to go where they want to. And they will end up going where they want to. I don't care what this political dynamic looks like. At the end of the day, the money's going to win out. And when you actually look at the net impact, it's going to hurt both schools staying in the ACC rather than letting them go to their natural landing spots and better opportunities.
And to follow up on that, at the end of the day, aren't we talking about access to the A3 or the A4, right? This final list, all these teams want access to the upper echelon of college football. And as long as they have access, the rest of it can be worked out, can it? I mean, if NC State joined the Big 12, that just raises the profile of the Big 12 more, and that adds more money to the conference. So I don't, there's no equity here. That's my question is, Immaculate, where's the equity between UNC and NC State?
In terms of like, what do you, in terms of having like the exact same landing spot?
Like them being treated, having the same, what was their verbiage? Let's see. I don't have that up in front of me. What I'm basically saying is that them being tied together and having to go to the same conference.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't look into the exact wording of that to mean like it's the same conference or broke. This is like the early stages of a negotiation. And so you're saying, this is what we want. That doesn't mean that in the end, that has to be what happens. They're coming in, playing a little hardball in this and saying, we're bringing in the Board of Governors. And that makes that state a little different from everyone else. So in regards to what he was saying, how they can do this, they have that set up there with the large state system of universities, and by their state law, it's all under the guise of that Board of Governors. So to me, the part to call out is how the Board of Governors votes to give themselves power to do something. It's like,
that's nice.
Of all of it, like, that's the only part that gets me going, really? That's how your system is set up? But in terms of them having that ability, I can't say it's a bad idea. I just would hope that, as Uj was saying, that they don't go so far with it where they actually damage themselves.
Aren't we really talking about protecting the ACC here, guys?
No,
Does this really have anything else to do with anything that's not the ACC?
I think they're just protecting those schools. I'll be honest. I don't think they want to
those
see
four schools, Duke and Wake Forest, don't never necessarily have.
They're not part of the system. Duke and Wake Forest are not part of this, though.
Well, they're being referenced here.
I mean, they're being referenced that they want them together, but I'm just saying, like, they could leave. They don't have to.
Look,
they're not.
I'm just saying, if we're really talking about protecting anything, they want to keep the schools together in the ACC, so they're both being promoted the same. If the ACC ceases to exist, where's the equity for NC State?
In an ideal setting, yes, and that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at this kind of as a this is a negotiation. They're saying that as we'd love to have them together, so we don't really need to have them leave and go to the SEC or the Big Ten. They're trying to play up their side in this, and what I think their side is that they just want to make sure that North Carolina State is not left behind if North Carolina leaves. I don't think this actually has a whole lot to do with Duke. I could be wrong. I don't think they really care that much about Wake Forest. Once again, could be wrong. I just think they're saying, hey, we have this thing going on with the ACC, and we're fine with that, and we'll keep them here. But in the long run, I think they're just trying to get the SEC to cave in. That's my take on it, and this is just a play at doing that.
I know you want to say something.
Yeah, I agree with Immaculate. I think this is a negotiation tactic, but there is the downside of that tactic too. So if the negotiation is to put pressure on the Big Ten or the SEC to invite both schools in, and it might result in a scenario where the Big Ten just decides to pass on both schools. So you might be harming UNC's ability to get into the Big Ten. And I want to tell you guys something. For the Big Ten, I am not sold that UNC is the number one target. I'm not. For the SEC, I think UNC is the number one target. But for the Big Ten, Florida State might be more desirable than UNC. So it's not like they're like this golden diamond gem and stuff that we seem to talk a lot of times.
Sorry,
right?
I said that, but I was taking it for granted that Florida State's already gone. Like, why even mention Florida State? Because they are the one that's already in the hand, right? So I think the Bigs already got that.
I think that a lot of people just have this misnomer that UNC is just like this golden nugget, like a Notre Dame. And you guys, they're not. They're not as valuable as a Notre Dame. And to the SEC, they're incredibly valuable because that's new territory. It's new territory for the Big Two. But guess what? So is Florida State going into Florida, and so is going into Clemson, South Carolina. It's all new territory. It's new markets. So really, I think that you're almost eliminating the chance of getting into the big if you play this negotiation game, which is a big risk, I think, for the big opportunity with UNC. So I just don't see the upside. It totally sucks for UNC. There's just no win in this at all. For NC State, I think it's going to be a possible loss too, because they could jump into the Big 12 or have an avenue there.
Moen, you've been very quiet. Anything you want to say to that?
No, I 100% agree with you. And I think North Carolina may be overplaying their hand here. The SEC desires them, but I don't believe the SEC desires them enough to take North Carolina State along.
No, they don't.
And if they did desire them enough to take North Carolina State along, they would have to kiss Virginia and Virginia Tech goodbye. The SEC could stand at 16 right now. They've got enough brands. They're in a geographic footprint. They could stand at 16. This is blackjack, pure and simple. They're at 16. They can stand. If the Big Ten lands Florida State, they can stand at 19. I think North Carolina's representing that they've got blackjack, and I don't know that that's necessarily the case.
Let's get to some questions here. You guys have noted a bunch for me while we've been in this conversation, so let's get through them. Conundrum says Big 12 could be a winner in the end and get NC State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Between the four of us, what's the chance that the Big 12 gets all four of those?
Less than one.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Are there any two that you would pick that stand out?
I think the two that I would like are not the realistic two. That's UNC and Virginia. Those are the really, really good schools. NC State and Virginia Tech are really good schools for the Big 12. Those are fits too. So I think you take any of these schools you've listed, Conundrum, but I just don't think UNC to the Big 12 is a realistic proposition. Virginia probably is not either, but it's more realistic than UNC.
Anything else, Moen Immaculate?
That's pretty much it. I think that North Carolina State and Virginia Tech are actually really good schools for the SEC and match it very well. So if the Big 12 was able to get those two, I think that would be amazing for the conference. I don't see UNC and Virginia coming there. And quite frankly, besides basketball, I don't actually think that they're good for the Big 12. Like, it's just not a good fit. I don't think you guys would enjoy kind of being with them.
Really quick, we have a new member that's in the house. Thank you for joining us, Coy. Member of the show. Can we get a clap in there too, Moen? Can I ask for a clap? I like claps. We appreciate you joining. We have 133 people watching right now. Everybody, please subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Follow us all on Twitter, and then turn on your notifications on Twitter and on YouTube so you know when our shows are coming up. TJ Pittinger is going to be joining us hopefully real quick. I know he had to push us off a little bit, but I'm expecting him any minute, by the way. Coy, thanks again for becoming a member. Want to encourage everybody else to become members so you have access to all of our special shows. There's one right now, Clemson to the Big Ten. Is it real? And you have to be a member to watch that show. A month membership is all $3, guys. So the articles, I guarantee you, they're worth $3. All right, let's go to some more comments. Caden's dad, another one of our members, on the Clemson Big video, should Clemson get a higher TV mark considering how fast the South is growing and that Clemson is 2 hours from Charlotte and Atlanta. UNC is about the same distance from Charlotte. And Caden's dad, thank you very much for being a member.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So that the answer to that is where the information came from. So that information for the DMA for Clemson, that's the Spartanburg market, that came from Sports Media Watch. And Sports Media Watch is a very reputable source there, and they actually tag P5 schools into certain DMAs. And the information that was gleaned in the video that was shown was based on that info. So I relied on that info. But to cross-check the thinking too, Immaculate was kind enough to find an amazing source that was actually a little bit stale. So some years old, but the New York Times actually did a fan map with teams and showing like where the concentration of fans are. They kind of give you an idea.
Map. It wasn't a heat map.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I took a look at that before, putting the video out and stuff to look at Clemson, and looked at Atlanta, like what kind of contingent of fans for Clemson are we looking at? And like maybe in Charlotte and elsewhere. And really, Clemson wasn't a serious player in those markets. There's Georgia Bulldogs, there's Georgia Tech. And so I don't think that giving Clemson a market like Atlanta or Charlotte really is realistic. I think that they're in their DMA market. That's where they're going to be on TV and stuff. And guys, like we all know that markets are not as important. They're becoming less and less important, while they're still semi-important. But like, with streaming and everything else that we're moving to, brands are more important than markets too. So in the video, really that had a 1/7 weighting on the overall ranking for Clemson. So it wasn't even that material. And if you added a few adjustments, it wasn't going to swing anything on it at the end of the day.
Have you actually published the formula?
Yeah. I mean, I showed everybody where that was.
Okay.
Like in that Clemson video, on the second slide on that video and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
How's it going?
Here we go, TJ. Thanks for coming here
guys?
tonight.
Hey, how are you?
Doing okay.
Doing okay.
Can you hear us? Are we lagging?
No, good to go.
All right, awesome. Welcome to the show. We need to do this again. I was on your show once, and I really liked that experience. So we're glad to have you here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you guys for the invite. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late. I've got 3
okay.
kids that are 5 and under, so sometimes bedtime doesn't go as smoothly as
Wow.
you think.
Wow, you got your work laid out for you.
Yeah, they're also a great excuse. They really were the problem tonight, but in times that they're not, I just blame them anyway. So it works out great.
Well, cheers to you, TJ.
Cheers.
So before I dive into this equity article that who was it? Pete Thamel wrote out for the private equity in Florida State, possibly getting funding. Kind of tell us what's on the ground right now at Florida State in news. Anything that's in the background that we might not, we're not asking you to break news tonight, but anything you think people might not have caught that we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing obviously going on right now is the lawsuit, right, with the ACC, and that's certainly not a quick. There's been so much speculation about it, and there's been so much talk about what may happen, but that's not a quick process by any means. It's something that likely won't have resolution for a year to year and a half unless both parties settle. So that's kind of always going on in the background right now in Florida State world. Kind of a when would a move happen is a big. It's always on the kind of really the forefront of everybody's mind, but there's other stuff happening too, right? They've been pretty active in the transfer portal. They've got a top 5 transfer class. They're if you look at early rankings and early predictions, a lot of people think that there may be a drop off, but it may not be a drastic drop off. They may be able to compete for the ACC and thus compete for the playoff if you win your conference. So, yeah, I think it's just kind of figuring out all those pieces, getting toward the spring, getting closer to the spring, figure out a lot of new pieces and a lot of guys that moved on from the program and trying to figure out how to keep it running. I don't know that they can compete for it all this year. I don't know if the team is that good, but I certainly think they could compete for a playoff spot or compete for 9-3, 10-2, which should get you pretty close to the top 12.
How confident are you that Florida State's already got a landing spot at the Big Ten?
I don't know that I am confident that like a backroom deal has already been struck, right? Like a handshake and a wink type thing. is that possible? Yes. Is that also collusion? Yes. So, I don't think that it's already like happened, but I am 100% confident that if Florida State was out of the ACC tomorrow and it did not cost the SEC or the Big Ten any money, that they would be in one of those conferences. Right. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think it's already been done. But I think that if, the big question has always been like, well, can they get out? Right. Or,
Right.
is the Big Ten going to have to give something up to get them? Well, if they're able to get them without giving anything up, I think they're in one of those two conferences almost immediately.
And we're not intimating at all that the deal's already struck. That's not what we talk about. What we basically say is we're fairly confident that Florida State feels very good in their spot to be able to sue and get out of the ACC. And to do that, there has to be at least some recognition that they have a spot sort of waiting for them. But of course, it's not collusion, and we're not saying that here at all.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that's clear. When we talk about it, that it's not certitudes, we're talking about our guesses. Anyway, I appreciate you doing that.
Oh, it's going to happen, Bomber. It is going to happen.
Okay,
TJ,
so-
you know it. I know it. It is going to happen.
And I
It's a
think
matter of time, baby.
I do think conversations happen, right? And I don't know if they're, they happen with like the two parties that would get involved, but
Right.
I mean, these people are talking with network execs. They're talking with people that used to work for this network or used to work for that network, or attorneys who have represented certain things here, there, wherever. And so I think there are conversations that very much go, hey, if we got out, my guy over here says that this way, so like, I think there are certainly conversations happening, probably just, very guarded to not get in trouble. But I think Florida State, if they're doing all this and don't have a landing spot, then boy, talk about egg on the face.
Yeah, no joke.
So
Immaculate.
TJ, let's.
Oh, sorry,
Do you mind,
go
do
ahead.
you mind if I ask a TJ question here?
No,
So,
go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about like funding the potential exit of the conference here. So what's the latest on the JP Morgan news or other funding sources, perhaps with private equity? Do you know how that would work out on like the logistics of the funding of whatever the dollar amount is, whether it be 100 million or more? How's Florida State going to pay for it?
Yeah. So, I mean, if they pay, there's a couple of questions, right? So your exit fee is 120 million, right? And, but your rights would be something that are owed annually. Like there's not a line item that says like, oh, well, your rights over 12 years is, 600 million. So you owe us 600 million up front. It would be an annual thing. Now, Florida State's obviously trying to fight that and say like, hey, we don't know any of this and cut that down to zero. But say worst case scenario, a judge comes back and says, nope, the ACC is right about absolutely everything, and Florida State's wrong about absolutely everything, and you owe every dollar that the ACC comes up with that you potentially owe, right? 571 million, I think was the number that got tossed around. It wouldn't be like all due up front, because your rights are paid out every year. Like it's not like you have to pay this all, at one time. Now, if Florida State got in a situation where the ACC said, hey, we'll let you go tomorrow, but you owe us 200 right now, then how does Florida State pay that? I mean, yeah, that's where I think you'd kind of get into the private equity side. You get into some other stuff of trying to tap resources to potentially fund an exit. At the same time, I think if you're negotiating and you negotiate just like in anything else, right? If you're negotiating a settlement, most of the time terms are going to come with that, right? Oh, you owe us 200 million. Very rarely are they going to say, hey, you owe us 200 million and it's due today. It's usually going to be, hey, pay us this 200 million over the next 10 years. You owe that, like just like anything else, right? Like if you owe back taxes, like the government's not like, oh, just you have to pay it all this second. Like usually they'll work on you with payment plans and stuff like that. So to me, it'd probably be a pretty similar situation. And based on people I've talked with, though both sides don't really like each other right now, like they both want to figure out a way that this can work. And so, yeah, I don't know that they'll have to go the private equity route. Now, I think that if they get to a situation where, they lose on absolutely everything and the ACC wins on everything, that's where they'd probably tap into some of the private equity, the JP Morgan, just all of the kind of craziness that we've not seen in athletics to this degree yet. But I don't necessarily think that that's the route they want to go. Obviously, they want to get out for nothing. But even if they do have to settle, I think there'll be a term attached to the settlement. I don't think it'll be like, hey, y'all owe us all this up front.
Have you heard of any like creativity on how that would work possibly if you did go with the JP or private equity? Like, would it be a loan through them, or would they have access to future media rights? Have you heard anything on how that could be structured?
I think they'd probably be pretty, they'd probably try to stay away from, getting anything else into media rights that was trouble, right? Like just based on, what they've signed over now, and trying to get into the Big Ten. Like you want to have the full kind of gambit there for the Big Ten or the SEC to kind of have to play with, right? You don't want to say, hey, well, we only owe 50% of our media rights or 80%. So yeah, I think it'd be pretty loan based. Our Peter Collins, who is the board of directors of, he is the chairman of the board of trustees. So if you've watched the board of trustees meetings, he's kind of the guy that leads them all up, is very heavily involved with private equity. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much on like how I think it might go down, because that's all way, way over my head. My assumption would be it'd be pretty loan based. I don't think that there'd be any kind of like ownership stuff thrown around. I think, Florida State would understand like, hey, we need to do this and be what's best for us, but we're not going to like give stuff up later at the detriment of that. And so I would lean towards it more so being loan oriented, but again, that's way, way over my head and where I'm at. And I'll tell you, like, I think they have that private equity stuff kind of as a fail safe, but I really think they feel confident about their case and not really having to tap that, extremely at all.
That would be ideal. Definitely.
Immaculate.
Well, first off, good to meet you, TJ. Been watching some of your videos for a while. You guys have some good stuff and been going there. So nice to meet you.
Yeah.
I have a little bit lighter question for you than that. This one is maybe you've heard or not, but the Big Ten has an exhibit up in Atlanta at the College Football Hall of Fame that is now focusing on the Big Ten coast to coast. I'm just kind of curious what your opinion is. Do you think there will be very many people from Tallahassee traveling up there to have a look, and maybe, who knows who they might meet there when they're there?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, right? And I think that ultimately that's where Florida State would like to land. I think, just personally as a fan, I would rather be in the SEC, right? I think the style is much more similar to the SEC. I think geographically it makes more sense. No shots at the Big Ten. I think there's a lot of good football that happens there, but I don't know, like I think like getting jazzed up about like the mid-level matchups that you play in the SEC would certainly be more exciting than like the big level, the bottom half of what you play in the Big Ten and stuff. So I don't know. Also, I just kind of hate the cold. So all that considered, I think I'd lean, but I think that,
I think most fans would agree with you too, what you're saying. Like, I think most Big Ten fans, we would understand why Florida State fans would want to be in the SEC first, if at all possible. Yeah. It just kind of seems like the SEC continues to kind of put their boot on you guys. So, and in terms of administration, I think more like the administration and school folks would maybe lean towards Big Ten. So you guys might have a bit of a split there. I just think the way the SEC worked the college football playoff, that might have pushed some of your donors in the other direction.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I think there's there's an angst right now towards ESPN and, you could go to the Big Ten and kind of not have any of that right on your side and say like, hey, we'll really show you. But when rubber really meets the road and dollars and cents get thrown, money can certainly mend some bridges, I guess. So
and this is long term too, like grudges and like temporary anger aside, maybe the SEC still is the better choice for a lot of fans. It's just it kind of seems like your administration really likes the Big Ten.
I think so. I think they like it academically too. Florida State's applied for UAA membership and they don't have it yet. I'm sorry, not AAU. Yeah, UAA is the governing body that covers UF sports. And I was actually just on the phone with somebody else talking about that. So I was like, wait a minute, that's not the right word. But yeah, they've applied for membership. They haven't gotten it yet, but I've heard they're really, really close. McMurphy tweeted out a few months ago that wasn't a direct requirement, though it's kind of thought to be pretty important. But I think Florida State will gain that in the next couple of years anyway. And so I think a lot of things matter more for the Big Ten. I think some of the grudges and stuff that they have short term right now. I mean, the Big Ten's more money too right now, and I've proposed this, if the Big Ten was to get Florida State and Notre Dame and let's say like pull in like a Miami. And I know there's not a lot of like hype around Clemson right now, but like if they did pull, like say those were the 4 that the Big Ten went after, like you can't tell me that the Big Ten wouldn't at that time be better than the SEC. And I know that that's going to like rub SEC fans the wrong way. But I mean, when you really think about the brands that would be represented there, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC, Florida State, Oregon, Miami, Clemson, like it gets Penn State, Michigan State. Like we got a lot in there. And the SEC has gotten propped up for a long time because they have Alabama and Georgia, right? Like I get that. But then past that, Texas, Oklahoma, LSU. Okay, well then what about past that? You're looking at teams that were good a long time ago, like Tennessee, Florida, Texas A&M, then you're getting into like the Missouri, South Carolinas and stuff. So anyway, yeah, I think that it would behoove Florida State to be that way. So yeah, I don't know how many trips to Atlanta they're making right now to go back to your original, to the Hall of Fame or not. But yeah, I think that's ultimately where they want to land.
Just to follow real quick, if I could, and this is something we wanted to talk about. Paul Feinbaum, I think, would actually agree with you based upon what he had to just say about the Big Ten and the SEC now being relatively equal. If those schools you said joined the Big Ten, arguably they would actually be the top football. Not to take anything away from the SEC, but it would be one hell of a lineup.
Yeah, I mean, when you really just go, and I've done it, like, I'm an Excel nerd. So like when you really just go like team for team, right? Like, and you take the best of the best, and then you do like your tier 2 and your tier 3 and really look through that. Yeah, I think that the Big Ten would be a little bit better. Now, again, are Michigan and Ohio State, you're 1 and 2, like, are they on the same level as Alabama and Georgia? I mean, maybe not, I mean, obviously you can say this year, well, Michigan won, but Alabama and Georgia won like the last however many. So, but once you get past Alabama and Georgia, man, I think there's a lot of, is Notre Dame and LSU comparable? Sure. Is USC and Texas comparable? Sure. And then is Oregon and Oklahoma comparable? Sure. Okay. Well, then you also add Florida State and Penn State and Miami and Clemson, I think it'd be pretty strong for the Big Ten at that point. So I don't know. Some SEC fans will probably think I'm crazy for saying that, but once you get past the 4 or 5 in the SEC that can legitimately win a championship, like teams in the SEC that right now can legitimately win a championship are Oklahoma, Texas, Alabama, Georgia, and LSU. Past that, I think you got a lot of teams that used to be good in the SEC but aren't really anymore.
Moen, I'm going to ask you a question, and you can direct the answer to TJ. Sell the Big Ten picking up Florida State as an idea. Why do you think that's a good thing?
It's a good thing for Florida State because they're going to get lost in the shuffle in the SEC. I'm sorry. It is. It's going to be second banana to Florida down there. University of Florida is going to dominate. They're going to push them around. They're always going to hold that grudge. Coming to the Big Ten, you're joining the national brand. They are putting together a national brand. I ultimately see them at 24 teams being the dominant brand in college athletics. And Florida State's going to get treated like the jewel of the South. That's going to be their flag that they're planting in the South that says, hey, this is Big Ten country. This is no longer just SEC country. We are a national brand. We are in the state of Florida. This is our brand that we are choosing to represent us in the state of Florida. They could also go get Miami to do that, but they've obviously shown they would definitely like to have Florida State. I don't believe that Florida State makes this jump without being assured that they have a landing spot in the Big Ten. I think the administrators made it very clear in their meeting earlier this year. Their academics are on an upswing. Their research is on an upswing. They talked about their nursing college there. They want to be a part of the Big Ten. And the Big Ten wants them to be a part of them. I don't think that the SEC feels the same way necessarily. I understand Florida State fans may feel that way, but when it comes to the SEC, the Gator fans are not plussed on having them in there. Georgia's nonplussed on having more people to recruit against. LSU's going to be nonplussed on the situation. So it's just a matter of, I think, who really wants you. That's the Big Ten. And who's going to treat you right? That's a Big Ten.
And Moan, just to piggyback off that too, what's the upside? Okay, so if Florida State goes to the SEC, you're competitive and stuff. Like, really, are you going to be able to overtake Florida? Are you going to be the biggest brand in Florida? Maybe. But, like, if you go to the Big Ten, you start dominating because you're in a brand new conference, a juggernaut conference, and you are the only presence in Florida, and that you have a chance to become the biggest brand in the state of Florida and in the South, 100%. The SEC does not warrant that. There's other brands like you're doing something new, something innovative. So I think that's absolutely no brainer. I can't believe any Florida State fans want to go to the SEC. It's shocking. As an outsider looking at that, the opportunity in the Big Ten is tenfold what the SEC brings as far as what you could be in the future.
Really quick before TJ answers that, TJ, did you get a chance? You did watch our video on Florida State to the Big, right? I remember you commenting on it.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I thought it was really well put together, and I thought you guys really went through the facts very well. Somebody sent it. Actually, a couple of people sent it to me, and I got it like 3 times. And finally, after the third person sent it, I said, "Okay, I'll watch it." You know, like it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I said, "Okay, I've gotten this enough tonight. I'll finally watch it." So but it was really good, and it was a busy day. Just like the portal and stuff's been nuts, and you guys did a great job with it, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad that enough people bugged me with it.
So what do you think about Moen and Ute's comments?
Yeah, so I'll say this: I think you guys make a lot of great points, and I don't even necessarily disagree. I think that if Florida State was to be like that Big Ten team, in the South, like that would be
like the anchor school.
Yeah, like that would be an incredible advantage,
right?
And I truly do. Yeah, like I don't disagree with that at all. I'll say this, like as far as being like the, Florida State fans would probably take a little issue with thinking that they weren't quite the brand that Florida is. Now Florida has way more living alumni. Florida has been around longer, but Florida State fans would probably take a little issue with that just based on what they've done over the last 30 years compared to what Florida's done, based on the TV eyeballs that have hit the Florida State over the last 10 years versus what the TV eyeballs that have hit Florida have been over that time frame, based on how Florida State has done everything that Florida has done and more with getting less money. And so Florida State fans would say, hey, yeah, could the grass be way greener in the Big Ten? Yes, but we've already dominated Florida for really since Bobby got here. We have a winning record. Really, if you look at the last 10 years, Florida State's had the series. Last 20 years, they've had the series. More Heisman, same number of championships. Florida State's played in more championships, more weeks at number 1, more top 10 finishes, all those things. Florida State would then say, well, man, if we got to the SEC, how much more would we separate ourselves from Florida at that point? Because we've been doing it in the ACC with less resources and less money and less brand. So I do think Florida State fans would probably take issue with that, saying that they'd be like, just play second fiddle to Florida. I think Florida State fans think we would go into the SEC and Georgia would be there, Alabama would be there, Texas would be there, but nobody else in this conference worries us, right? Like, no, Florida's going to be your rivalry game that happens every year. You just beat the hell out of LSU 2 years in a row. Like that, I think Florida State's like 8-2 all time against LSU. So I don't think there's anybody in the SEC, maybe Georgia, Bama, that worries them. So I think Florida State would think, no, we'll go to the SEC and we'll be that team in the SEC too. Now, is it also still true that you go to the Big Ten and you have way more upside? Yeah, like that's where I would agree with you. Like, but I don't think Florida State fans look at the SEC and are like, oh man, we'll just be team number 2 behind Florida. I think they think that they'd go there, and if they've done it this far without being the SEC, they can continue to do it once they get there.
Isn't that what Bobby had big qualms about though? They had chances to join the SEC in the past, and Bobby kept saying no.
Yeah, I think the SEC in the early 90s was much different than what the SEC is right now, right? And so Bobby gets a lot of flack. Bobby was already playing Florida and Miami every single year.
Right.
And scheduling out of conference like no one else in college football history has scheduled. Like we're 3-0 against Ohio State, never played them in Tallahassee. Winning record against Nebraska, played in Tallahassee 1 time. Somebody put in the comments 9-2 against LSU. I think we've played in Tallahassee 1 time. So Bobby would schedule, what it was, anytime, anybody, anywhere, anytime. And so to me, Bobby gets a bad rap for that. And I'm a Bobby Bowden apologist. So certainly you're talking to somebody with garnet and gold colored glasses on, but I think that Bobby gets you wouldn't join the SEC because the SEC didn't win 15 championships in a row back in the 90s, right? Like Bobby was already playing the best of the best and said, hey, I don't need to play any better, right? And so holding Bobby to this standard of like, well, if you'd just joined the SEC 30 years ago, then your team wouldn't be in this situation. Like the SEC wasn't that much better than anyone else back in 91, 92, 93, when those conversations were kind of happening. So
I would argue that Alabama by Saban changed the paradigm.
for sure.
He broke the mold. And Alabama representing the SEC, then it led to Georgia becoming a juggernaut. You take those two teams out, though, the rest of the conference, like you said, you could pretty much be competitive with any of them right away. I guess it just depends what you guys are really looking for. You're looking for immediate wins and less competition, essentially, or you're looking to grow your brand to become something bigger, different than maybe anybody's ever thought of before.
And that's what I mean. I loved Moen's point about that. Like something I really hadn't thought about because, I think about the things like, man, traveling to Minnesota, or traveling to like the Grove, right? Like and tailgating all day in the like, yeah, give me Oxford, right? Like I'd much rather go do that.
Right.
But yeah, like to be that national brand, and I think Florida State will have a partner, right? Like whether that's Miami, whether that there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest around Clemson, but I mean I'd prefer Clemson just because I care about football more than I care about academics or anything else, right? Like, but yeah, if you had a Southern partner, Florida State's already making some trips. People love to say like, oh, well, they're already traveling to Boston and stuff, and traveling to Boston's a lot different than traveling to Oregon. But we're also traveling to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. We go to North Carolina 3 times a year. We play 3 games in the state of Florida. Yeah, that's true. We do go to Boston like every other year, but that's different than having to go out to California and Oregon in the same year, which hopefully would never happen. But, the travel in the Big Ten seems like that's going to be something. Football is certainly king. I do wonder how it impacts, some of the smaller sports, right? If Florida State's able to get into the Big Ten, how does, how does that impact like women's tennis, right?
Right.
Need to go play because they lose money, right? Like they lose money anyway. And I mean, most of the Olympic sports do. Are we, do you just kind of play that more regionally? Like, are you not taking on Oregon and UCLA and Washington and teams like that in a season, or does everybody meet in the middle and you play all those neutral? Like they're going to have to figure that out because that's going to be a revenue suck that like is not good for anyone. It's not good for Oregon to have to travel down here to play Tallahassee women's tennis and stuff like that. So that's a big question that I think I have with it. I've looked at some numbers on some of that non-revenue travel, and man, some of those teams play a lot of games, more than our 12 in the fall. And I just wonder how that kind of works out.
Well, we learned from the Big Ten and UCLA, USC, Oregon, and Washington that travel, they're going to have to figure it out. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe they do regional hubs or something like that. You guys having a travel partner is important, but at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for Florida State, right?
I think a lot of that's going to be figured out by the situation going on with the NCAA this year, in terms of what the final solution is. Some of the travel problems, certainly that's going to come up because that's not just for Florida State, that's everyone. That's kind of where things are going. So we'll see about that, and it's a real question to have on this. But even if at worst case scenario, the travel for Florida State is going to be immensely better than it is for Oregon or Washington or UCLA or USC. It's the distance between Florida State and up here is much less than it is from the West. And like our scheduling, it's set to make that be a little bit nicer. So you probably wouldn't be going out West more than once a year.
Yeah, no, especially with football, right? And that's what they do a lot of times. Like right now, and I mentioned women's tennis specifically, but a lot of times, like for the non-rev sports, like they'll if they play at Boston College, like they'll play Syracuse the same on a Thursday, and then Boston College on a Sunday to while you're up there, kind of make that trip. So yeah, if they had to go to Oregon, they'd probably play Washington a couple of days later, and then maybe you stay on the West Coast and play like just kind of one West Coast swing when you're doing that. But yeah, it'll be interesting to figure all that out. A lot of people make a lot more money than we do to solve those problems.
Exactly.
Absolutely right. Here's a question from JBaller54. He says, how long are we looking at on this lawsuit with FSU going to take to settle? If It's all wait a second. Settle to see if they can leave. I'm not sure what the end of that means.
If they can leave.
If they can leave is what I'm
I
guessing.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would project this at about a year and a half from the time they filed, right? So that would
Okay.
that would be, they filed 2 days before Christmas, so that would be like next June. Could it happen before then? Absolutely. I had Doug Rohan of Rohan Law on, and
Right. We love Doug.
Yeah,
a stud.
he's great. And he talks kind of just about like how court dates are set, how long they have for discovery, how long, and best case scenario, maybe a year and a quarter, worst case scenario, maybe like 2 years. He said he doesn't think it goes to court though.
Yeah.
So his guess is that it gets settled before the season starts, right? Which
before August.
Before August, right?
What we talked about. Yeah.
I've spoken with an attorney who worked for Florida State, doesn't any longer, and thinks that it's probably more likely that they settle during the season or after the season, like shortly. Like he said like before the end of the year, but not before the season starts was his guess, right? Like we really don't know.
Right.
They could the two sides could strike a deal at any time. And then I think the follow up to that was like how quickly could they get out? I mean, the deadline is, I don't know what it is this year. Last year it was August 15th. Yeah. So a day before, probably because just the way the calendar jumps year to year. But so middle of August, right? And if they want to be out, I think my gut says there's like a 60-40 chance that this is the last year they are in the ACC. Right. But if they play 2025 in the ACC, I'm like 95-5. Like I would be like, if we're here 2 years from now talking about a 2026 ACC FSU schedule, like I'll be pretty shocked. So I think it's a year or two and they're out.
From what you've heard, and you've talked to lawyers like we have, is there any downside to doing this lawsuit? Like, what do they lose? They might get a fine, but they're not going to kick FSU out, right? So really,
that'd be great.
FSU, it's house money.
Yeah, court costs. Really
about
about the risk here. If you lose, then you're in a crappy conference anyway, like just like you were before. And then it becomes, do you want to go the private equity route? Like, do you want to just suck it up and pay the money and go? And I think they will, just after talking with some people and chatting around a little bit, and the few little bit of insight that we try and get here and there. I think they will, but that's what their decision would be at that point. So yeah, I don't think they risk anything at all.
Really quick, 170 people watching us live. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, follow us all on Twitter, and make sure you turn on your notifications when everybody here is posting something. You get the news first. Before we ask any more questions, I want to give you a chance, TJ, to tell everybody what you do. I should have done that at the beginning. I apologize. We dove right into questions, but
no.
Why don't you tell everybody, what your show's about and everything?
No, it's good to do it in the middle. That way, if the people think I'm an idiot after talking for 15 minutes, they can choose to not listen. That was a perfect way to do it. So cuts down on the love, but more informed decisions for the audience now. Now I do a show called Double Fries No Slaw. If you're familiar at all with Tallahassee, that's how you order your Guthrie's chicken tender box. Guthrie's is kind of like a Cane's or a Zaxby's. They were both actually born out of Guthrie's. So yeah, check it out. Double Fries No Slaw. I actually just started a second show called College Football Addiction. Man, I live for this stuff and I love college football. And I feel like sometimes the stuff I want to talk about doesn't really fit well into a Florida State channel. And so I kind of just started as a place to like get off some national takes, right? Like, so all the national stuff or all the Florida State stuff will stay on Double Fries No Slaw, but brand new channel. It only has like 500 subscribers or something, like real small, but it's just a place I can kind of like put some national thoughts, and people can check those out if they want. College Football Addiction. So that's the newest thing.
Very nice.
So you describe exactly how this channel started, right? Big 12 Mafia is where it went. We were going to talk Holy War, BYU, Utah a ton.
Right.
And then after about 3 weeks, it was all realignment, all college football. And so I dialed it back on Big 12, and now we do focus on those stories, but moreover, the overarching story is what dictates to these conferences, and that's why it's so important. So it sounds like you're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. And I like it. I like it a ton. I mean, I kind of live for this stuff. I like college football a lot, and the Seminoles are certainly my passion. But I don't know. I watch about everything in the fall. My wife hates me, but I enjoy it.
A question here for you from Caden's dad, one of our members. By the way, if you want to get a comment in and you want to guarantee we ask it, make it a super chat. We've got over 500 comments at this point. It's impossible to track all of them. I'm doing my best that I can. But right now we're only doing member comments. I just can't get to any of the others. So if you want to ask a question to TJ or the panel, it's going to have to be a super chat today. Sorry, everybody. Question for you, TJ. If only FSU is added to the Big Ten, do you think that FSU keeps Miami as an out-of-conference game along with the University of Florida, which is mandatory?
Man, I hope so. I mean, I hope Miami just comes along with them, right? So,
right.
But part of the rivalry is like you'd love to see them just die, right, and fold as a conference, as a program, right?
There's a lot of people that are saying that, yeah.
Yeah. So. But yeah, I mean, I'd hope, but man, that's tough, right? What do schedules look like at that point, right? Are you playing sorry for my ignorance here. Is the Big Ten playing an 8 game, right? They're not playing 9 games.
9 games.
They're at 9.
9.
Yeah. So the ACC plays an 8, right? And that's really why Florida State's able to kind of schedule creatively and do some different things.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be tough. You're playing 9. The Florida game is going to happen. And then, your 10th game is Miami. Man, they've probably got the toughest schedule in the league in the country, like a lot of years with both of those. To have 2 regularly scheduled Power 5. Well, I guess it won't be Power 5 at that point, but what essentially will be like a Power 2 or 3 conference games would be tough. Do they keep it? I think they try and keep it for as long as they can. But I think they would probably get to a point where if Miami did not end up in the Big Ten, if it seemed like there was a path for them to get to the Big Ten, they'd probably keep it until that Miami got there, and then hope that was their yearly opponent.
And to be on the up and up real quick on that, we're probably going to see 10-game schedules here at some point in the future, especially if expansion happens. So, yeah, you guys in the Big Ten, you might end up playing both Florida and Miami in OOC if Miami did not come along. I mean, what would you think about that? Just real quick before we go into pickles here.
So, you're saying it would go to a 10-game schedule?
If we go up to like 20 teams or more, we might have to do a 10-game schedule. So that OOC is going to start to get constricted.
Yeah, I think they'll keep the Florida one. I think if they can only keep one, they'd keep Florida. Would they keep both and not have like a cupcake game? Whew.
I mean, if we put Indiana on the schedule, you're okay.
Yeah,
with that, right?
Can Indiana be our yearly? If that's the case, then we'll agree to it. Don't be making our yearly like
you got to have those
freaking Michigan.
We'll give you Rutgers as a rival. How about that?
Don't do that to Miami. They may lose. If you watch the bowl game.
Yeah.
Sergeant Pickles here for a super chat $4.99. Thanks, Pickles. He's also a member, just so everybody knows.
Appreciate that.
TJ, thank you. If you want to clap really quick, Moen? Sorry, I was talking right over that. We got low production value here, TJ. Sorry about that. Who would TJ like to see as FSU's partner coming in? Also, what big team? So he's getting a twofer here because he's asking.
Yeah, smart way to do it.
He also asked, what big teams would you like to see as rivals you play more frequently? And I would add this really quick. Sergeant Pickles is our master scheduler. Just in the last 4 or 5 months, he's made schedules between 18 to 36 teams, I swear. So that's why he's asking that question about scheduling.
So yeah, coming with us. I mean, if I only got to pick one, it'd be between Clemson and Miami. If I got 2, then I'd want both of them. That's certainly asking for a lot, right? We're already going to a tougher conference, and then I say like, give us our 2 of our toughest games possible. But yeah, I mean, I think Clemson makes a lot of sense. I think Miami makes a lot, probably a little bit more sense from a conference standpoint. Football only, I think, Clemson would be kind of your next pick. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be one of those 2 to try and keep those rivalries going. Outside of that, I don't even know that I really care like about bringing anybody else along from the ACC. So it'd be one of them. I don't think anybody else really brings it up. UNC, I mean, who cares? Who would I like to play in the Big Ten regularly? Man, I don't know. It feels like everybody's already got their like standard opponents. I think Nebraska would be fun. I think,
Nebraska, you could go back and basically redo all those games in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I mean, like that.
Florida State and Nebraska every year in a bowl game.
It'd be a ton of fun. Now,
It was crazy.
obviously, my answer would be like Ohio State, Michigan, but knowing that they already have their stuff built in, like I tried to give a realistic answer. But yeah, I think Nebraska would be fun. I think Nebraska would be really fun. Obviously, if we bring Miami over, they're going to be one that we play quite often. But yeah, I'm excited for some of those teams. Like I said, we've played a lot of teams in the Big Ten that have never come to Tallahassee. It'll be cool to see them there, as opposed to being here, there, and everywhere. I've always wanted to go to a whiteout, so I mean that'll be cool. I've always had a ton of admiration for Michigan State, mostly just from Tom Izzo, but I've always liked the program as well. I liked D'Antoni when he was there, so Michigan State would be a fun one that. I don't know if we've ever played Michigan State. So there'd be some fun ones in there as well. I mean, I complained about going out to Oregon and stuff, but yeah, Florida State, USC, like a home, back-to-back home and homes, like good Lord, could you imagine how fun that would be? Like going out to Southern Cal for those games, like going up to Oregon, having Washington come here. Like, yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff that could potentially happen.
Hey, TJ, let's go down the speculation zone for a second, okay?
Oh, no, speculation.
Deep speculation. So say that, Florida State leaves, so that Miami leaves, Clemson leaves, the ACC. So the ACC is occupied by Pitt, NC State, Virginia Tech, and say Georgia Tech. Like, what do those schools do? What do you think, based on your perceptions, on like maybe what you've heard or what you think on the move is for those schools?
I mean, I think a lot of them fit the Big 12 mold, right? I think Pitt does. I think NC State does, but there was legislation that came out, or not legislation, but there were rules passed this week that basically UNC can't leave can't leave NC State in the dust, based on their board of governors. And so I don't know that I think NC State fits the Big 12 pretty well too. I just don't know if they'll go. They might get kind of a cherry picked ride. We talked about if the Big Ten was to pick up, Florida State and Miami and Clemson, then would the SEC then take in UNC and NC State just to kind of equal the teams, even though NC State certainly isn't worth a full share at that point. But yeah, I mean, if I'm Pitt, if I'm Virginia Tech, I'm trying to jump ship. I'm trying to find another landing spot. If Florida State's able to get out, and Clemson's able to get out, and Miami's able to get out, other teams that don't necessarily have a landing spot in the Big Ten or the SEC are going to try and get out, just because there's at least more stability in the Big 12, right? People aren't looking to jump ship there like crazy. And if we end up going to, somebody mentioned 24 teams. If we end up going to 3 2014 conferences, then the Big 12 has a little room. And, I know that, I think Pitt's a decent enough brand to make it over there. I think Virginia Tech's a decent enough brand to make it over there. I don't know if Syracuse or Boston College are, but I think there's some Georgia Tech, there's some brands in there that could make it. So that if I'm those teams, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get over there as fast as I can.
Do you think that Andy will just stay around the ACC and try to collect the potential exit fee money and stuff and live off the exit fee money that Florida State would potentially dole out with other schools that leave?
Possibly. It depends on what the judge decides in this case, right? If Florida State ends up having to not pay anything, then there ain't going to be no exit fee to live off of, right? Or if it's just if it's 120 million and you got to split that up between if they say they tell them, hey, you got to pay your exit fee, but your rights are, I don't know how deep into the rabbit hole you guys have gone, but essentially the idea in Florida is, yeah, quick refresher. The idea in Florida is that you can't have liquidated damages. And so if you say our damages are 500 million and the judge says, no, your damages aren't that much, they can't lower the number. The number just goes to zero. And so if that's the case, and Florida State just has to pay the $120 million buyout, which I think they would do in a heartbeat. You split that up between 16 teams,
and you extend it over 13 years.
Yeah.
It's not paid the next day.
It's not a lot of money. And I think they'd still be looking to get out. I don't think that exit fee stuff would be enough. Even if you had it from 4 teams, right? Then you're talking about what does that end up being over, across the 13 remaining teams?
You might be close to 10 million a school.
Yeah. Not enough.
You extend it over 13 years and it's aggregated and then dispersed in different, probably the farther you go, the more money you get. So up front, you're not going to get a ton.
And do they even have a conference once ESPN says, hey, we're not renewing this thing with Florida State not in here?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think their media rights deal with ESPN probably not going to renew it, unless Florida State like kind of gets locked with their media rights deal about to do the same thing the Pac-12s did, where nobody wants to pick it up. If I'm a team, I think you're going to start seeing them one by one start to jump as fast as they can.
Yep.
Moa and Immaculate, have any other questions?
No, I think I got mine on there. I just kind of, some folks were curious. I mean, what about Penn State University? I know you mentioned them briefly in terms of like a major rival. Like, what kind of history is there with Penn State and Florida State? Now, I thought you guys had pretty good history, but sometimes it seems like some of the fans maybe don't see it that way.
Yeah. So I remember I think it was a 3 overtime game that Bobby and Joe's last game in a bowl game. Yeah. We've only played, I just looked it up real quick, 3 times, right? So it's not much, but yeah, there was a bowl game in 2006. Yeah. The Orange Bowl went to triple overtime, if I remember that correctly, that we lost by 3, and I think there's a tie and a win. So not a ton of history there. I think there was almost like a fake rivalry there because Bobby and Joe were like fighting each other for like who had the most wins and stuff. And so you always cheered against Penn State because you just wanted your guys to end up having more wins. When it was all said and done, obviously Joe took the lead, didn't give it up. But yeah, I think Penn State would be a lot of fun. Not very geographical, which, we think of, rivalries in college football as being a geographical thing when, here I am wearing a Lakers hat and our biggest rival could not be further apart, geographically. So it's just a thing in college football, I guess. But yeah, I think Penn State would be a ton of fun. I mentioned wanting to be at a whiteout. I think those are 2 really solid programs that have been really solid for years and are really like set up to be very good, for a while. And so I think they'd be a lot of fun for sure.
Super chat from Cleveland Rocks for $5 as a member. Also, thank you very much, Cleveland Rocks. And we get some clapping in there. With all the major conferences going national, many of these universities will start cutting non-revenue sports to save money. It's inevitable. And I would also throw in there Title IX. All these lawsuits, House versus NCAA, and a bunch of these other like college football playoff renegotiations. There's so much legalese and stuff going on out there. Nobody can put a stake in the ground right now and declare that these other non-revenue sports are going to be around, can they?
I mean, especially once they start paying these kids as employees, right? Which is probably coming at some point. I think it would be very tough to justify some of that, right? Like at that point, it really does become, it's always been a business, but when it becomes that kind of a business and it's losing you even more money. And I'll tell you, like, I am not a non-rev sport basher. Like I took my daughter to the Women's College World Series this year. I love going to, the beach volleyball team is coming here in a couple of weeks to Tampa. I can't wait for it. Like, we go and we watch and we kind of view it all. But man, if that's a tough pill to swallow if you're an AD and you're losing almost double money on it because you're having to pay salaries at the same time, that'd be pretty tough.
Anybody else want to answer that comment from Cleveland Rocks?
I totally agree with TJ on that. Like, there's only so much money to go around. Like, while the pie is growing continually, but when the students are employees, student athletes are employees in football and basketball, it's just going to cut away from the athletic department revenue. And when that happens, there needs to be budget cuts elsewhere because you're going to be surviving off less money in your athletic department. Let's face it, we're going there, and they're going to be cutting sports, especially if there's an increased travel cost like the Big Ten to Florida State. If you're going to LA for a game and stuff, you bet your bottom dollar it's going to happen. It's just inevitable. It sucks. That's just part of the game, though. There's really no going back on that because we are going to a model where there is going to be employees, and that is going to be, legally upheld. We all know it's coming, right? So it is what it is, and it's just too bad, though.
So we've almost had TJ for an entire hour, which that wasn't my plan. I was going to let you leave earlier, but so many good questions. So I just want to let you know if any of us can help you on your show, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, we're all here in this creator space. So if there's anything we can do to help you with your new all over college football addiction channel, please don't hesitate to ask.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think you guys do a great job. I've seen several of your of your shows, I'm a conference realignment nut too. Like, so I enjoy it a ton. I watch way too much of it. I intake way too much content, and it's a lot of fun. So no, I appreciate it a ton. Same thing though. Anything you guys need, please just let me know.
One last comment, and then I think we'll let you go. Carson for $1.99 super chat says, "Lol, add in inflation over 10 years, and it's a steal." I think he's talking about that payoff money that they might get from a school leaving, and then how that's extended over the rest of the ACC schools. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about that? I just wanted to make sure
Especially
we got to
because
that.
within 10 years, we're going to have new deals.
Right, two more. Right.
Yeah.
So those deals
Yeah.
could just make these numbers actually get dwarfed. So there's a whole lot that we don't know still coming at us.
Mhm.
Do you have any questions for us before we let you go?
What? Oh man, putting me on the spot.
I like to do that. I do it to
Yeah.
Bob Thompson.
No
Bob
doubt.
Thompson, the first time I asked him, he paused for like 10 seconds. He's like, nobody's ever asked me that before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why I'm just
certainly
feeling with small talk right now, so I can think and act like I had something.
That's okay.
No, what do you Florida State joins the Big Ten, right? And we go more hypothetical here. Where do you? I mean, I know based on your video that you did the other day that we've commented back and forth on a little bit. Where do you ultimately like see them slotting in, right? Like how competitive are they with the majority of the conference, and then how competitive are they truly with the big dogs, right? With Michigan and Ohio State.
I'm going to let you start that because it was his data that we're going to talk about, and then we'll go around Immaculate and then Moen.
And I do appreciate your response video to that too. TJ actually took that into consideration, some of your comments, and I've revised the model going forward and everything. So
Heck yeah.
major kudos to you.
It wasn't your fault. It was Windopedia's fault.
But I didn't change that. Sometimes you just see things a little bit differently, but like some other feedback that you had. I think that if FSU gets into the Big Ten, they're going to be, I think they're going to be a juggernaut. I think they're going to be an absolute beast. I think that it's a really, really beautiful fit. I think football is I think the brand of FSU is going to grow to a level that I know, locally, we've kind of talked about this already. I think nationally, I think FSU's brand is going to grow and grow and grow and become the big player down south and stuff like your Georgia right now, or Alabama right now. And so I think it's going to be a major win. I think that FSU can step in almost immediately and become competitive at the top end of the conference. I think that's going to take a few years of recruiting to get to that Ohio State level. But I definitely see FSU, challenging for championships in the Big Ten. I think it's really pretty clear to me that is a really great fit and stuff. And it makes you different than all those other schools in the South. It makes you different than Bama. Like it's just a different brand and everything that you can bring to the table. You'd be aligned with the USC. Notre Dame's probably jumping in one day. I mean, it brings a little bit of a swagger that FSU used to have that they've lost. Well, I mean, from an outsider, from the Bobby Bowden era and stuff, like that different type of swagger. So I love it. I think it's great, and I hope it happens.
Immaculate.
Quick, can I follow
go
up?
ahead. Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
follow up?
Sure.
And I'll make this quicker so that Immaculate and they can go too. But do you feel the same way? Like if you're a 10, right, on Florida State coming in and competing, 9, 10, whatever. What's your number on Clemson? Like where would they fit into that?
I think they're about a 6 or a 7 in the Big Ten. Clemson, we're looking at Clemson. Actually, just did a video on Clemson. Actually, the same type of video on Clemson that we did on Florida State, and Clemson's not quite as good a fit as Florida State. For a variety of factors. But I think that Clemson is kind of a football program, at least, that's kind of on the decline a little bit more. They've reached their peak. I don't think Florida State's, reached the new peak that they could reach in the Big Ten. And Florida State's had success, 3 national championships, a lot of number ones and everything. Like, not trying to discount anything that Florida State's ever done, but like getting there and winning back-to-back, like multiple juggernaut national championships, being the school that everyone you think of when you think of Bama today. I think Florida State could do that. Clemson just is not going to get there. I don't think that they're ever going to be able to get there in the Big Ten. And I think that we've kind of seen the best of Clemson. So I would say about a 6 or 7 out of 10 for Clemson, but a 9 or even a 9.5 with Florida State.
Yeah, cool.
Immaculate.
Well, just to go off of that, in terms of real quick, Florida State versus Clemson, I don't think that both get into the Big Ten. I think they both fill the same space. I like to make a comparison to the Washington and Oregon grab. I think both Florida State and Clemson would be in that position that Oregon was, which is making the networks happy. And then within the big, then there has to be a school that makes the administrators, the academia, and all those people happy, because that's going to be part of the Big Ten Academic Alliance. It's going to be part of the logistics buying program. It's going to be part of the research consortium. So for me, I have a hard time believing Clemson with Florida State, but I could be wrong on that. In terms of what I see Florida State in the Big Ten and the value, I like it paired with Penn State. I like having that bookend on the East Coast. I like kind of them at some point in time having the same type of relationship that we see between Ohio State and Michigan that I think we're going to see in the future with Oregon and USC. Not that Washington couldn't also be part of that, but you know what I mean? Kind of having these groupings to where that becomes a rivalry game, and that often decides how far you go. In terms of how far Florida State could go, I think the top. Do I think that Florida State could hang with Ohio State? Yeah. Michigan, yeah. I think that it would actually be the better angle for Florida State to go, to kind of have this national relevance of not just rivalries against LSU and Florida and Alabama and all those to the south, which I know is very relevant down there, but we're kind of seeing the game become national, and that even from the south point. So I think Florida State having those big national rivals and being known, because you're going to be playing on ABC, CBS, not ABC, but CBS, NBC, Fox. You're actually you're on Peacock. You're going to have and we just saw what that did with the NFL. So I think that's going up as well. I just think that you'll have more visibility. And I think that kids these days coming up are quite possibly, I don't want to say for sure, but possibly a little less on the regional side and a little more on the national side. We're seeing that happen in the transfer portal. So I just think the sky's the limit for Florida State in the Big Ten. And I think that there's a lot that the conference would do with them. I don't see it happening in tandem with Clemson.
Owen.
If Florida State joins the Big Ten, they are the new triumvirate. I think the next 10 to 15 years, they would be up in the power section with Ohio State and Oregon. That's where I see them landing. Iron sharpens iron, steel sharpens steel. I just see those three schools would be within the college football playoff on a yearly basis. Those three schools would be competing for the conference championship on a yearly basis. As far as a rivalry, I like Penn State as a rival because, quote unquote, Penn State has no rivals, as they like to tell everybody in the Big Ten. And I have started to warm up to Clemson, although I still think Miami is the better travel partner for Florida State.
And my answer is yes. My answer is yes, it's Big Ten. Just go start getting your branded gear. Put the Big Ten football logo in behind you there, and Florida State's there. It's just a matter of time. It's not when. It's not if, but when. And the reason I see is the common denominator is FSU is the brand. We're not talking academics. We're not talking AAU. We're talking FSU is the brand that Fox would like to bring in and absolutely put them with Oregon. Yeah, I know you dropped Michigan out of there, Mo, and I thought that was interesting, and Ohio State and Oregon. But and because you guys would be an island, I think it's in my opinion. I know Greg Flugar maybe thinks differently, but I think it would be a huge mistake if you guys brought Miami with you. I think you need to get somebody to come with you, like a UNC, maybe even a Georgia Tech, somebody that isn't going to pull the shine away from your school. You guys could be the pillar in the Southeast, and I think you would just thrive.
Bomber, you just nailed it. Actually, it's a beautiful combination right there. Based on what I've been looking at, the Florida State and UNC pairing. I don't see UNC going to the big. I see them going to the SEC because the SEC does not have the North Carolina market. But if they could land UNC and Florida State, that would be very akin. Basically, be a little bit of an advanced version of the Washington-Oregon move. Right. Very similar in a lot of ways. I think that Florida State is very similar to Oregon on a lot of levels. And I think that UNC is very similar to Washington, but just maybe a little bit more clout, but like very similar plays. So that would be a beautiful fit. I think the Big Ten would love going after that. So great point.
All right, TJ, I think we went around the horn. Unless you have anything else for us, I think we'll let you go.
I just have a big shout out for Moen for going straight from the handle there. My guy.
He said Georgia. Our drinking game is if somebody brings up Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia Tech is the drinking game. Yeah. That's a little inside joke. Oh, and here we see Ute is getting in on it too. There's Immaculate.
Just for you, Moen.
There you go.
Nice.
There you
guys are
go.
Awesome. I love you guys. Thanks for drinking for me. That's what I'll say.
Yeah.
All right.
Happy
TJ,
to.
thank you so much for being here. Look forward to having you back on again. And again, don't hesitate to reach out if we can do anything to help you. It's a team effort out here with creators, and we absolutely support what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it a ton. Had a blast.
All right. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend. We'll
TJ.
talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Hi, TJ.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Bye-bye.
That was good stuff, Bomber.
Damn,
Really good
there we
stuff.
go. All right. Absolutely. I want to thank TJ for taking and accepting my invitation to come. That was really cool, and him being here, I think, is really important for us to support his show. We encourage everybody to go and subscribe to his new, what was it, College Football Addicts? Is that what it was?
College football addiction.
So look that up on YouTube. Everybody subscribe and make sure that you're following TJ and everything he does. You guys want to bring up anything else before we move on to another topic?
Which one you got? What do you got coming up? I'm ready to go.
Let me answer this question first. Edward Weiner. Sorry I couldn't get this in with TJ, but we needed to let him go, Edward. If the Big expands to F2, if it expands with FSU, and who knows, maybe adds an unhappy Texas A&M in the future, would the Big's TV numbers increase by being truly national conference? Is that an advantage over the SEC? My answer is yes. If they could get Texas A&M, they'd be brilliant.
Oh, that'd be a great player.
Excellent question. I see the Texas A&M and the Florida State in the Big Ten eventually. Excellent question.
Forget about it.
I think that was pretty simple. Edward, thank you very much for your comment. We really appreciate it. We've already gone through all our super chats. We're going to now spend the next amount of time here answering questions and going through additional topics. But I have to leave. So I'm going to leave this to these guys to take over for me. The topics we were going to talk about was Paul Feinbaum's article. That's linked in our chat.
Saying I was a joke.
So is the Pete Thamel article again. We could touch back. You guys touch back on the private equity a little bit if you wanted to. I'll just leave you with those couple. I don't think there's any others that really warrant any answers. But everybody, thank you for being here tonight. I'm sorry I have to leave, but I've told my wife, man, 7 o'clock, I got to go. So I got to get out of here. You guys have a great night. Have a good weekend.
Take care, Bomber.
And Mo and Immaculate, you guys have a good Mowing After Dark on Sunday for me, okay?
We'll do.
We'll do.
Okay.
Have a good night, buddy.
Please follow us all on Twitter and make sure you subscribe to YouTube. What a great show. You guys have a great night. Peace out.
See you, buddy.
Thanks, Nate.
We have control.
We're in power
We
now.
have taken over.
So where do you guys want to start out with? Do you want to start with Paul Feinbaum and let Immaculate?
Hell yes. What's going on, Paul?
Yeah, let's jump into Feinbaum here.
All right.
This ought to get the chat pretty riled up quickly, too.
If anybody hasn't seen it yet, we put it in the chat. Paul Feinbaum came out with a column today, basically saying that the SEC and Big Ten are now equals with the addition of Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA, and the potential addition of Florida State.
He said it.
He said they also did a great thing by doing away with divisions because now we no longer have to see the joke that is Iowa playing against Michigan or Ohio State in a title game.
What do you think about that, Immaculate?
What are your thoughts on that, Immaculate?
That one hurt, but it hurt because it's true. And when I say that, Iowa is a joke because they had the 133rd ranked defense or offense with arguably the best defense by having their defensive coordinator win coordinator of the year. And we even saw they basically stopped Michigan's offense and just handed them the ball within the 20 like twice so that they could score without those handovers. So he's not wrong. The whole idea that Iowa, wins that division with the worst offense in all of FBS and goes on to the championship, it is a bit of a joke. I mean, if that didn't actually happen and someone was to say, hey, this is going to happen, you'd be like, yeah, funny joke. Like, it's quite literally a joke. So not mad about it at all, but I think he's also very much changing his tune when he says the SEC and the Big Ten are now equals because of the incoming schools. So, and one of the things he also said there to add to it, he said that Petiti and Sankey have now been working together, which if you saw Petiti's initial interview with, with Klatt, when he was doing his Sunday conversations, he said one of the main things he was told to do coming in was to get on good terms with Sankey so that the SEC and Big Ten could start to work together. So it was basically kind of the SEC side saying, we're working with the Big Ten. So that's a big change. I don't know if people realize it or not, but for him to come out and say that, to me, that was actually the big point of the article.
Yeah, the takeaway that I've got, great comments there, Immaculate. I think that the Big Ten is on par right now with the SEC. I think that with the addition of Oregon and USC and Washington, I don't know how you could say that the SEC is much more powerful conference. And that's some big time ads. Oregon's a legit national championship contender this next year. These are powerful, big brands. These are the biggest brands out of the pack, right? These were the biggest brands. So I think that Feinbaum sees that. I think the SEC's lost a lot of its strength, although they're adding Texas and Oklahoma. I think that playing field's been equaled, and I think that Florida State, if they jump over to the Big Ten, I think it overtakes the SEC. And if you add Clemson and Miami, I think that just adds a little bit more to it. So the Big Ten's in a great spot, and I think that they're becoming the most strong power conference out there.
Yeah, and real quick, with Cleveland Rocks, one of our very valued members saying the Big Ten has a lot of bottom feeders, and it's going to get even worse with the addition of the incoming schools. What the Big Ten needs are its mid-tier schools to get back on track. We need Wisconsin back on track. We need Nebraska back. Well, they need to be a top tier, but they need to first get back to mid-tier status again. And, if Michigan State, if these schools finally start to play where they're supposed to be, it doesn't really matter if Minnesota and Indiana and Purdue and Rutgers are playing at the bottom. That's where they're supposed to be. Every game requires a loser. So it's just our mid-tier needs to get back on track. And it looks like they're doing that. So I think with the additions, I think the Big Ten's going to be a lot tougher than most people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, we've got 5 gifted memberships from Summit Hawk.
Way to go. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, Summit.
This one I knew. I was dealing with a bad ace.
Winner.
There we go. There is.
He's got the Jayhawk squawk. He got the pull from the handle right there. Thank you so much, Summit Hawk, for your continued generosity, dude. You knock it out of the park for us.
Yeah.
Show in and show out. Outstanding. I would just say you're Immaculate. You're 100% correct. Some people need to get their act together. Wisconsin has taken the step up. Nebraska has taken the step or taken the steps to move up. Rutgers has taken the steps up. I think Loxley is killing it at Maryland. We even mentioned it briefly in that Clemson video from yesterday that you and I did, that it's surprising how well Maryland is among recruiting perception within the United States. So, and comparative in the Big Ten, I think it was ninth in the Big Ten out of 18 schools, which is really saying something. So, but thank you again, Summit Hawk, for that great 5 gifts. You don't know how much we appreciate that. And if you did receive one of those gifts, they were gifted to Chris Evans, Ag Biochemist, Debbie Perkins, Awesome Lawson Clips, and Timothy Green. Make sure you say thank you, and a big shout out to Summit Hawk for hooking you guys up with those free memberships. I would recommend first thing you do after the show tonight, go check out that Clemson deep dive that Wild Ute did for his series, Wild Ute University. I think you're going to be surprised on how Clemson fits into the model. So,
Yeah, in terms of Maryland, I think their coaching staff is pretty well respected. Their head coach Loxley, he comes from the Saban tree. I think he's kind of known for having a good staff on him. So I think when you're looking at recruits having this idea and people are kind of shocked by it, it's like, well, they're dealing with the coaches. A lot of them, that's who they're talking to. And Maryland's kind of known for that. And to be honest, they had a quarterback with a very famous last name. So, his brother with Alabama won championships, is at Miami Dolphins. So I think that's also kind of helped in the perception.
See, we got a comment here from AMAC. Cleveland, which of the 4 new teams will be bottom feeders in the Big Ten? That's a great comment. What do you guys think? Who are the bottom 4 in the new Big Ten? Let's leave Florida State out of it. Let's just say the 18 teams we have now.
I would say that the bottom feeders will remain the same. I don't think any of the new additions from the pack will be bottom feeders. Not even UCLA, and certainly not USC, not Washington or Oregon. So Indiana will remain there. Mm-hmm. Illinois will remain there. Purdue will be often a bottom feeder. And then it's probably going to be a mixed bag, maybe add in a Rutgers and a Minnesota. So I think that it's going to remain the same. I think the teams that have been bottom feeders are going to continue.
Yeah. It's Indiana, it's Purdue, it's Illinois, it's maybe Minnesota, and my surprise pick is UCLA.
Yeah, I would take.
Sorry, I'm just saying real quick. They're not going to have all the Pac teams to beat that they've beaten in the past.
Yeah,
they're going to have Oregon, they're going to have Washington, they're going to have USC, and they're continuously probably going to be the bottom of that 4, and that's who they're going to play every year. So I think UCLA is going to be on a fall.
I think people are too harsh to judge Illinois after this season. I think Brett Bielema is a good coach. I think Bert's a good coach.
As an Iowan, I reserve the right to always judge them harshly.
But I think Bert's a good coach, so I would add UCLA. Purdue, Indiana are always going to be your 2 perennial bottom feeders. They never seem to invest the money in football that other schools do because they're basketball schools. They always have been. I shouldn't say they always have been. Purdue has occasionally produced a Drew Brees or, somebody like that. But I'd say Purdue and Indiana. I would put UCLA in there. And I hate to do it to Greg's Golden Gophers, but, I'm not sold on PJ Fleck. I am not sold on him. So we shall see. But that's who I would put as my bottom 4. UCLA, Purdue, Indiana, Minnesota.
So UCLA is an interesting case study because if you look at UCLA's talent composite historically, they're a top 25 talent roster, guys. Like they really are. If they can get the right coach there, they're going to win games. It's not a talent issue, it's a coaching issue at UCLA. And it's a fan issue too, which isn't changing. But I don't have to see UCLA becoming a bottom feeder. I really think that USC and UCLA are going to be good programs. So UCLA is going to be more middling. It's going to push down, your Minnesotas. They're going to struggle. There's a lot of teams in this Big Ten, though. It's going to be hard to get wins, guys.
Yeah, they're going to have a hard time getting their local wins. So then against teams that you might look at them normally and say, oh, well, they're a better team than in Indiana or Purdue or Maryland or all that. Yeah, but they're going to have to travel and they're going to have to go to those places and they're going to have to play at a time which is very early for them body clock wise. We're talking like as much as 2, maybe 3 hours earlier than what they're used to. Because a lot of times the Big Ten plays those early games. It's going to be very rough on UCLA. And if they're not able to get wins against USC, Washington, and Oregon in their zone, in their area, I think it's going to actually have a hard time continuing to recruit like they are now, let alone get even better to overtake USC, Oregon, and Washington.
And another issue with UCLA is the calamity tax.
Yeah.
Taking away from the revenues and, their future contracts with their players. That's going to bite them.
Yeah, it's a much different ballgame for UCLA now, not having the whole pack to play against.
Yeah, it's interesting the name. None of us 3 mentioned was Northwestern.
That's because I'm an Iowa fan, and I know Northwestern always finds a way to get wins.
You never want to play at Kyle Field, especially at night.
No.
Although there is no Kyle Field anymore, or Ryan Field, excuse me. There's no Ryan Field anymore.
It's going to be a
building
great
their new
stadium,
one.
though. Whew.
Yeah, it should be for $1 billion. So,
Yeah.
conundrum. PJ Fleck is 29-32 in the Big Ten, right? So, I mean, he's above 500.
At
I know
Minnesota, that's kind of
he's had
impressive.
the one really great season. I think he was 11-1 one season, or 10-2, or 11-2. Excuse me. After the bowl game, I think he was 11-2. But yeah, I'm not sold on PJ Fleck. You're never going to sell me on PJ Fleck.
When is the last time Minnesota won the Big Ten?
I probably wasn't alive.
I don't know.
So
Any of us were alive.
if you're not sold on PJ Fleck, what historical coach in Minnesota have you been sold on? Like, what's the
What?
expectations of
Jerry
Minnesota?
Kill was actually pretty good there.
Jerry Kill was good. Glenn Mason had his years. But he was down more than he was up too.
Tony Washington says 1967 in chat.
Okay. Well, there you go. 1967
I trust the
was
Gopher
the-
on that one.
was the last year that they won the national they won the Big Ten championship at Minnesota. So just I don't know if it's bad coaching hires that they've had there or just an overall downturn and getting recruits to come to Minnesota.
I think that's a big part of it.
But yeah, I mean they have their good seasons every now and then. Like I said, I remember Glenn Mason having some good teams there. But PJ Fleck just hasn't sold me.
I mean, here's the thing. A lot of times the Big Ten kind of gets a raw deal in terms of people thinking about the temperatures and the weather and all that up here. Well, when it comes to Minnesota, that's not wrong. Like that's the one that gives everyone else kind of the bad rep. Minnesota and maybe up into Michigan and Wisconsin, but Minnesota gets cold and it's rough. Their stadium is an outdoor stadium. So when it's bad, you're playing in it. And I just think you got to get certain players that are willing to do that. And there's going to be a lot that aren't.
I think this comment's right here. I love this comment. So Moan still has A&M to the big on the brain with Kyle Field.
Trust me, I'm going to explain this all in a video for members only. Yes, I have A&M in the Big Ten. I have Kansas in the Big Ten. Deal with it.
Do you want to talk at all about that? I would love to open up the discussion about A&M to the big.
I believe that the Big Ten is going to be the national college athletic conference. That when people mention college football, it's going to be Big Ten. You need a flagship school in Texas. I think at the end of this next media deal with the SEC and the next grant of rights with the SEC, Texas A&M has probably had enough of Texas's bullshit. They're going to say, we want out. The Big Ten's going to say, we want you in. We'll grab you. We'll grab Kansas. We'll get to a 24-team league. And I know Tony's in the chat right now telling me that 20 is enough. No, I think you need to get to 24. And I think you do that by adding schools like Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, Kansas, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame. I know a lot of people don't agree with it. They think it's going to stick at 20. I just think the Big Ten's vision is 24. 24 gets you into where you can have easy 16 pods, 4-team pods. There's a lot of scheduling opportunities, a lot of marketing you can do on these channels, broadcasts, Big Ten Network, streaming. I just think 24 is the optimal number for me.
Better travel partners too, which is going to be a big deal.
Absolutely. So I do think that there's going to be, I think Texas A&M eventually is a Big Ten school, not tomorrow, not 2 weeks from now, not after lunch, but eventually they make it in. So
do you see the Big 12 going to 24 as well and the SEC moving to 24? Is this going to be like a 3?
I don't see the SEC moving that high. I don't see, like, literally, I think the SEC could just stick at 16. They could just, I mean, if the cost is too high, if they're saying, well, we're not going to bring in North Carolina and North Carolina State as full members, they might just say, hey, we're sticking where we're sticking. I mean, they've got enough brands in there to be a powerhouse conference. Why dilute it any further? For the Big Ten, you're not diluting, you're adding. They're additive. I think Texas A&M's additive. I think Kansas is additive. I think Florida State's additive. I think Miami's additive. Some people disagree with me. Most people disagree with me, but that's the way life is. So,
How about the Big 12?
the Big 12 I could see going a couple ways. The Big 12 I could see sticking at 20, assuming they can get in the Northeast corridor, which means they need to add Louisville, they need to add Pitt, they need to add Syracuse, they need to add UConn. If they get to those 4 schools, I see the ACC surviving, and I see the Big 12 sticking at 20. They have their Northeast corridor at that point. I think that would make Brett Yormark happier than a pig in shit. He got basketball powers. He got the Northeast corridor. He gets into the New York market. I think he would be happy at 20 right there. And then obviously he would have to find a replacement for Kansas, which would possibly be Memphis, maybe a Boston College, maybe a Virginia Tech. I don't know. How heavy do you guys see it getting?
20 initially, and then there's a lot more things that have to happen. I'm kind of more of a chain of events type guy, so I'm not really timelining or anything like that. But I think once some of the NCAA situation gets resolved, if the autonomous conferences get their power like they want, then I think we're going to get a whole bunch of new rules, a lot in various ways. And then we might be able to look then at 24 if there's some new things like conference playoffs or other ways in order to make money in order to pay for it. Otherwise, I'm at 20, stop, and let's see what happens. That's pretty much where I'm at right now. So it's for the Big Tens, Florida State, maybe one more, and then we're probably stuck for a while.
No, I was at 20 for a long time, 20 for SEC, Big 10, and the Big 12. But seeing what's just happened with Netflix getting into WWE and seeing that the streamers are becoming more and more popular, something that, I know all too well being in the Pac-12 because of the Apple deal almost got done. Once the streamers get in, if they bring a new pot of money, then that brings additional revenue sources to bring these new schools for ads. So, Moan, you're 24, makes a lot of sense, and having divisions of 6, 6, 6, 6 within a conference, because you could basically have 16 pods that are better regionally, better for travel.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's been talked about in the past, but hasn't been brought up recently very much, an immaculate. That there's that lawsuit going on in California, right, with the USC. Do you know much about that lawsuit that's happening? I forgot the name of it.
The NLRB, it's the National Labor something board, sorry. But they're basically just the ones who coming in and saying, wait, you're treating these kids like employees.
Yes.
But you're not paying them like that. So they're coming from an angle of trying to prove that these kids are employees and you're not paying them. Is that from a fair labor practices method? So if they lose that's why people think this is going to go to employees, because it's going to be forced that way. And it's not just there. There's one in Pennsylvania. There's one in Southern California. But there's also one kind of happening with Dartmouth, I do believe, with their boys basketball team wanting to unionize. So that also is going to fall under the NLRB to some degree. So that's like on the side of the NCAA situation. We have this employee rights situation going on too. The National Labor Relations Board. Thank you, OP. So yeah, that's the gist of that. It's less a lawsuit, more of you're in trouble with the government type of situation.
You're an employee. We're going to show that you're an employee.
And
so caveat to that though, and thanks for giving that overview. Some of the like sports that aren't revenue producing sports in that lawsuit, on the USC side are making the claim that mental health issues are going to come into play again because of the travel going on. And that's something that we talked about in the past before USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten. That was a big issue. Hey, what's the mental health aspect? What's the travel aspect of these California kids going cross country? Well, there's that concern right now in that lawsuit. So that is a real thing going on right now that might impact realignment, where you're needing to get better geographical hubs, which would warrant a 24-team ad. Moan. That's where they kind of like you kind of wind that up and stuff and say, hey, it's better for travel. Certainly better for travel and stuff because you make these pods. So
Yeah.
I definitely see it moving that way. Actually,
And
in the
somebody
future.
brings up this great question or this great comment. Your vision would only work is only one conference would be relevant and Olympic sports would split. I disagree. I think the SEC remains relevant. I think the Big 12 remains relevant in that scenario. And I don't think Olympic sports would split. It would take less pressure. It would put less pressure on Olympic sports to have regional pods where you have West Coast teams playing West Coast teams, and you have an Eastern Coastal Division, and you have a Midwest region, and you have a Great Plains region. So I disagree with you there, but I mean, again, I understand that not a lot of people share that opinion. That is Moen's opinion. And a lot of people say Moen's crazy, and they're right, but they're not right about being crazy about this.
People just remember there's only so many wins available in one season within one conference. If a conference goes and lines up too many big powers, what you're doing is you're creating losing programs out of winning programs. So if folks are worried about this, like the Big 12, just remember it's actually going to be a better opportunity for you. As long as because you're going to get those opportunities to play in the playoffs. And as long as your teams are good, then you're going to show up and play well. So in terms of like the Big 10 is going to make it to where the Big 12 is not relevant anymore, that's on the Big 12. As long as your teams are good and it's competitive all year long through the Big 12, you'll be fine. To me, when I see these names brought up like Texas A&M as an Iowa guy, I'm like, oh, we're the ones that are going to get screwed. It's not the Big 12. We're the ones that are going to get pushed down the totem pole and probably have less wins a year and have less to be excited about. So, yeah, that's just where I see that. Having a national conference just means you have a national conference. It doesn't mean everyone else is all of a sudden, out the window.
Yeah, I think we'll go about another 15 minutes, guys. So if you guys in the chat, I see we got 161 people watching. That is amazing. Go ahead and hit us with your questions, guys. Let us know what you've got. Questions, comments, what you're thinking out there. Questions for us. Somebody with a really great point here. Respect every opinion because we can only speculate. That's it. We're just a bunch of guys and gals sitting out here with just spitting into the wind. So
it's kind of funny to watch what happens in chat sometimes. Right now, we've got a little debate going on, which is basically Kansas City versus Phoenix in terms of what market that Fox would like better in the Big Ten, it's always interesting to watch these things happen because to me, that's a comparable choice. Phoenix might be bigger, but you might get more viewership out of Kansas City per capita. So it's
you know what? We're going to answer that right now. I'm going to the research here.
Here we go.
We're getting.
I want to see if
all right, chat. We're coming for you guys now.
So just give me a second to get that information.
But yeah, it's actually. I'll just say Kansas is kind of a sleeper. Like if the Big Ten did want to go to 20 and their issues of getting any other schools out with FSU, Kansas might be that. I'm sorry to the Big 12 listeners, and I don't mean to cause too much worry. And I do think that Florida State could just be number 19 and that's it. But kind of that sleeper for 20, if nothing else works out, is it might be like a Kansas or an Arizona State. So to me, that's a very pertinent debate to be having out there in chat.
Numbskull disagrees with you. Neither.
I know we always disagree. I love disagreeing with Numbskull, and I'd love to have him on here and tell me exactly why, because it's always a good fun chat.
You know what? With Numbskull, I want to give you kudos about something. Yeah, a couple of days ago, you called PATC. I was listening in actually a day or two ago, and you challenged the notion of UNC, saying, why does everyone think that USC is such a crown jewel? And I actually was doing research at that same time, and I'm with you. I am with you 100%. UNC is a great brand and everything, but they're not what we think they are. So numbskull, major kudos to you for even questioning that. And really, guys, UNC for the SEC is much more valuable than I think USC for the Big Ten. USC really is very equivalent to Washington and everything, which is a great ad. They're going to be accretive. They're going to add a little bit of money. But it's not like they're going to double up the revenues. It's not like they can bring along NC State and still make money for the conference and everything. So they're on par with like a Florida State, guys. Like they're not something over and better and beyond. So UNC, I think there's a little fallacy there that I'm going to be looking forward to doing a video on here soon.
So what did we come up with as far as Kansas City versus Phoenix, Arizona?
Okay, so with Phoenix, Arizona here. So as far as DMA television households in Phoenix, Arizona, we've got 2,174,000. Okay, and that's 11th nationally in Phoenix, Arizona. And then if we're going to Kansas City, we're going down and we're looking at 1,019,000. So Phoenix is double the size of Kansas City as far as the DMA goes.
Now, do we think that maybe viewership would be twice as much per capita in like Kansas? Like say, you might get half of that market viewing, whereas in Phoenix you'd maybe only get a quarter, and so it kind of equals out. Or what do we think?
Yeah, as far as the allocation, that's a little bit different question and stuff. We're getting into like the TV realm where like how many people in the city are actually watching your television set? I'm not sure it really matters maybe at the end of the day as much. Moen, what do you think about that? Like how many people are actually viewing in your city versus the population of the city?
Yeah, I think it's relevant to success. People watch successful programs. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to dominate the Kansas City market because they're a successful program at this point in time. The Phoenix Cardinals are probably not going to dominate the Phoenix marketplace because they're a train wreck. So there's less competition from pro sports in Phoenix than there is in Kansas City right now. Although I think the Suns are doing pretty well. So you would have to compete with the Phoenix Suns, but I think it comes down to with the Kansas
Arizona was
thing.
in the World Series, so I mean they've actually coming along.
I think the thing with Kansas though is it adds a basketball brand. I think you can't underestimate their basketball brand. Arizona would add a basketball brand, but I think Immaculate, you're talking more about like Arizona State and Tempe as being the pick for the Big Ten.
They seem to be the ones coming along in terms like some research in the semiconductors and kind of pertinent future research. They're the ones growing more quickly. Arizona is big, but I don't want to say stagnated, but it just kind of seems like they are what they are. Whereas ASU is really kind of pushing hard into future stuff. So I lean for that. I know here in Scottsdale, Big Ten loves having their meetings here. There's basically resort world down in southern Scottsdale going into Tempe where there's just tons of resorts for plenty of people to come down here at reasonable rates. So they use Phoenix for that. So I just think that Phoenix is a market that they do want in the future if they can, but it's not like a must-have. But I think Kansas City is a good one. But if I'm looking at one more school out west for the Big Ten, I think Arizona State has just as good a chance as anyone else. The one metric that everyone always listed was AAU status. They got it now. They're the largest growing university in the country. So, I think it's a pretty strong pick if the Big Ten decides to need one more out west.
I think Arizona State's real similar to Georgia Tech. Immaculate. I think those two are pretty akin to each other in a lot of ways.
I mean, in some ways, sure. Arizona State, though, is, I think, the third largest public school in the country, and it's growing leaps and bounds. It actually has a campus in LA. People don't realize that. So they are there. They have a presence. They have a presence somewhere else, too. I think they're moving to Texas, maybe. But it's just the growth in all aspects is there. So I think when you're talking about a long-term pick, I think it's the better one, but Arizona is also not a bad pick if that's who the Big Ten decided to go with. But that's a Tucson market. But they do reach up into Phoenix too.
All right, we got a question here from Purple Orca. What if he wants to get rid of all conference championships? Would it be better for the Big 12 to force the playoff committee to choose 2 best Big 12 teams? I assume that is as opposed to having them play a conference championship game.
Well, your conference champion gets an automatic bid to the 12-team playoff. So you would technically be around. It would have to be a round robin format if you didn't have a conference championship game and somebody would win automatically. But perhaps, perhaps you can get a team in to the playoff that wouldn't have got there if they lost the conference championship game. So that's always something you need to consider. It can work in your favor or not. That's an interesting question though.
Super chat here from Summit Hawk, who is just again killing it tonight.
Winner.
Meth Zoo.
Meth Zoo is garbage. Always will be. Just like Quantrill and his Raiders.
Holy smokes! Dropping the hammer, Summit. Give him another Jayhawk squawk. Give him a Jayhawk squawk.
We're now entering the history section of the Big 12 Mafia show tonight. I got the reference. I don't know if you guys did, but Bleeding Kansas, a Bleeding Kansas reference on.
This is why the Kansas-Missouri rivalry is a little rougher than most people realize. It always dips down back into that.
Thank you again, Summit Hawk. That's awesome, and I'll play the badass one for you.
And that's when I knew I was dealing with a badass.
There you go.
Well,
somebody must have said Georgia Tech.
Hey,
so,
Georgia Tech.
Shoot, I'm running low.
Georgia Tech.
I'm starting to really like the Yellow Jackets a lot, guys.
I almost bought a Georgia Tech hat the other day. I saw one at the gas station. I said I should buy that.
You need to have that as an outfit one of these days, and it's just going to be every time anyone looks at Moen, you got to drink.
I just don't want to be responsible for alcohol poison in the crowd when I wear that.
Oh, that's right.
So,
That's true. Drink small drinks, very very
Drink responsibly.
Small drinks.
Yeah, this. You know what? I would love to talk to this one here. I'll read it too.
Go for it.
So Daryl says, my understanding of TV revenue is that having a conference team in a state allows the SEC or big channels to charge almost double. So it's all about adding a state and not just about how many TV eyeballs. That comment right there is correct to my understanding with the current iteration of the ACC contract. One of the caveats that the ACC was trying to pitch the University of Utah before they jumped to the Big 12 was that, hey, if you jump over to the ACC in Arizona State, if you jump over to the ACC too, you're going to have a pro rata, basically an equal pro rata that every other ACC team had at the time if a Power 5 level school jumped over to the ACC. So that was the structure of the ESPN contract. But my understanding is, after 2027, when ESPN likely won't renew that contract anymore, I don't think that that's in play in the current Big 12 contract or the Big 10 or the SEC contracts. So that might be an older contract structure that we've seen. But that's certainly true, and it's been true in the recent past.
All right. You have anything to add to that, Immaculate?
Yeah. I mean, they're getting into why would the SEC want to get into North Carolina? Why is that a big deal? Being in there directly, and they are trying to push an SEC network. If you haven't noticed, with Feinbaum shows and everything, by being in there, you do get in-state cable coverage. For ESPN, it's not such a big deal, but with them trying to push the SEC channel and basically probably to drop the ACC one, it matters, and that's one of the reasons why the Big Ten would want to get into Florida, because then now that it makes the Big Ten network much more accessible, and they get paid much more for it. That's why they would let a Florida State in as an equity partner on the Big Ten network, because that's what happens. You buy your way in as a part owner, so you have to bring more to the table for that, and that's why a Florida State, a Georgia Tech, and in Atlanta and Georgia, why that matters. Why when he's talking Texas A&M and people are like, oh, that's crazy. Well, they would get them Houston and Texas, and that would be a very big deal for the Big Ten. So it's a slightly different way to look at things when you talk about Big Ten expansion and SEC as well now.
Comment from Sergeant Pickles: if SEC is looking west, I assume TCU, TTU, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia University are on the list. I don't know that they're looking west.
I would only look at that if they decided they wanted to go beyond 20 for division's sake in the future. Like if we have divisions and division champs and playoffs and whatnot, they might look to round out a division that way. Otherwise, yeah, probably not. They're just going to do North Carolina State, the state of North Carolina, the state of Virginia, and that's it.
Numbskull News: Phoenix is a great sports town. Kansas City is sports and tornadoes and barbecue.
Hey, we have haboobs here in Phoenix, okay? We have.
What is that?
What is haboobs?
Oh,
It's immaculate.
yeah, I had to say it because it's the best word. A haboob is basically the word, at least for the sandstorms. You ever seen those walls of sand that fly into Phoenix?
Okay.
That's what we have. And they're actually quite dangerous in terms of if you're on the road at the time. But they're not quite like a tornado. They're not going to blow you over.
And you don't have barbecue down there. You don't have good barbecue in Phoenix. I've never heard of.
We have great Mexican.
Well, okay. I'll give you that. But Kansas City barbecue is.
Sure. Yeah, but we beat their Mexican. So.
Well, you probably do.
And I agree. From Iowa, I still like my barbecue Kansas City style. So Kansas City is pretty high on that list.
Winner.
Numbskull News with the super chat: UNC Duke basketball will be Big 12. Not even a possibility of it. He is saying it will absolutely 100% certitude be the Big 12.
Maybe he's right. We'll see.
You know what? Let's talk about this, guys. So, like, okay, if the let's go out there for a sec. So, if basketball breaks away from the NCAA, and in the A3 or A4 form their own B-ball tournament, and they bring in at-larges and stuff to keep it similar to the NCAA tournament, you know how much money that brings in for everybody else that is not currently going to, A3, A4 schools and everybody else. The NCAA tournament brings in $1 billion a year in revenues. $1 billion. The average per game viewership is 10 million, guys. 10 million per game in the NCAA tournament. That's based on Yahoo as of 2 years ago. That's the Yahoo Finance article I read recently. There is so much money to be made in basketball if you can unbundle away from the NCAA and form your own thing. If you're the Big 12, and like in UNC and Duke, all of a sudden become way more valuable in that type of world. I mean, you're talking about basketball being worth 50 to 60% of football, possibly rather than 20% in its current iteration. So something to keep an eye on as far as a big development in the future is getting away from the NCAA basketball tournament and forming your own. And the Big 12 conference is actually sitting really pretty if that happens. So that would be a huge development for the Big 12.
All right. This is Tough Tony.
Winner.
There's a pig on the back of my Iowa milk cartons. I think he's talking about Floyd of Rosedale.
I think he is. But you know what? That's okay. We've got to let them have their year, right? I mean, you can't just constantly every year beat them and never let them have it, because then it's no longer a rivalry. And, then the statue means nothing. So every once in a while, you got to let them have it.
Hey, isn't there a Georgia Tech yellow jacket too on the back of milk cartons?
Oh, shit.
I need another drink.
And with that, we better wind it up before I have to
Before he falls out of his chair.
And before I fall out of my chair. I want to thank everybody for coming out
He's
tonight.
kinda
These
leaning,
Friday
actually,
shows are just crushing it. We love the comments and the feedback we get on the Friday shows. You guys kill it. We're coming up with a new concept for the Friday shows. We just haven't figured out what to name it yet. If anybody's got some great name recommendations, by all means, submit it to us. I think you had Friday Night Pints, but if I'm drinking pints of Crown Royal, there's going to be some major
That's
issues.
going to be an issue. Yep.
There's going to be some major issues. Summit Hawk sneaking in with the late super sticker for $4.99.
Winner.
Give that man this Jayhawk squawk.
He's the champion.
Thank you, Summit.
Thank you, Summit Hawk. You killed it tonight, dude. Appreciate it so much. Just let you guys know we're working. We'll be Immaculate and myself will be on Sunday night at 8 p.m. for Mowing After Dark. We'll try
And
and make
Wilder,
it
if he joins us.
Yeah, if Ute wants to join us, you can by all means join us, Ute. Numbskull News, if you're out there, if you'd love to make a stop by. I don't know what your Sunday looks like, but it's always a good time when you're there, my dude. For that, but we're going to end this show at 150 viewers, guys. Unreal.
And that's when I knew I was dealing with a badass.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're going to end it with being the cream of the crop, rising to the top, my brothers. So we will see you guys on Sunday for Mowing After Dark. We will see you next Tuesday for the next episode of the Big 12 Mafia Show. Love you guys. We appreciate you guys. We can't do this show without you guys. I may be a little too lit, my guys. Peace out.
Keep it going, man. Go Utes.